Alma looks straight ahead with total focus as he calls out his fireball spell. He thrusts his hands out, and a massive beam of fire shoots across the field. The blast travels fast and slams right into the center of the target with a huge explosion. Alma looks back as the target smokes, and his maid starts cheering, telling him he was wonderful. She goes on about how impressive it is that a kid his age can use magic with that much precision, and the maid gets even more hyped up, calling him the very first prodigy the Fellows family has ever had. Alma just stands there feeling a little awkward, telling her she's definitely overdoing it with the praise. But she isn't having it, immediately asking him if he really thinks she's exaggerating. She points out that the power and accuracy of that last spell were on another level, especially since he hasn't even received his official gift, yet making his natural talent pretty much unheard of. Alma looks down, thinking about the special gift he's supposed to get eventually, knowing that at 15, the goddess gives everyone a special ability, with the combat types being the most prized of all. A massive pillar of energy suddenly slams into the ground right next to him. The shockwave is so strong that Alma has to shield his face while the maid lets out a quick shout. Alma stares at the display, instantly realizing he's looking at some high-level lightning magic, and he mentions that when it comes to that person, it's impossible to even tell where the attack is going to hit. Alma calls out to his older brother Keith, who shows up looking pretty full of himself. Keith looks over and tells Alma he sees he's still out here training as hard as usual. The maid gets all worked up again, saying that's exactly what she expects from the family's greatest prodigy, and she goes on about his purple lightning wizard gift, mentioning that even the guards see him as a total ace. Alma gives his brother props, saying he's doing exactly what everyone expected of him, especially since he's already gotten such a good handle on those high-level gifts. Alma asks what he needs from him, mentioned he's surprised Keith even bothered to come all this way just to talk. Keith stops for a second like he just remembered something, and tells Alma that their father actually has a little bit of time to see him now. Alma looks pretty shocked as Keith adds that this whole meeting is really just for his own good. Later that night, the two of them sit down for a quiet, fancy dinner in the main hall. Their father looks up from his food and asks if it's true that the ceremony is tomorrow. Alma stops eating for a second and confirms that's when he's supposed to receive his gift. He just looks down at his plate and gives a quiet answer, the pressure of the big day finally setting in. Lord Fellows mentions he tried to get Kureha and Keith to join them, but they just wouldn't listen. He quickly brushes it off though, saying it's fine since they're both great at what they do and always busy. The mood at the table shifts as he looks at Alma and admits that he's actually pretty worried. He starts wondering out loud if Alma is really going to get a gift that's actually good enough for their family name. After a moment, he wipes his mouth with a napkin and decides to be totally honest about his expectations. He looks right at Alma and says he's really hoping the kid is the one to take over his title of sage. Alma just stares back in total shock, the weight of the sage title hitting him all at once. It's a huge deal since his dad is a legendary sage, and his mom is a top-tier mage, so everyone expects the kids in their bloodline to end up with some kind of crazy powerful wizard gift. Even the oldest brother, Kureha, has already made a name for himself as the famous Red Lotus Wizard. Then there's the second son, Keith, who's already known as the Purple Lightning Wizard, making it clear that everyone in this family gets a gift specialized in a specific type of magic. Both of the older brothers have these top-tier wizard gifts that set them apart, and yet there's one gift that's on a completely different level than everything else. The Sage gift is the most powerful thing a wizard can have, letting them use all kinds of magic. It's exactly how Alma's dad built up the Fellows family name so fast on his own. The idea of having two sages in the family back-to-back is massive, and Alma can really feel the pressure when his dad mentions he's been watching him closely and has huge expectations. He tells Alma that he'll definitely be a big deal for the family no matter what gift he gets. But the real shock comes when he says he cleared his schedule to watch the ceremony tomorrow. Alma wipes his eyes with his sleeve, totally moved by what his dad said, thinking about how happy he is and telling himself he's going to give it everything he's got. The day of the ceremony finally comes at this massive temple. The whole place is packed with people. Alma tells himself it's okay if he doesn't end up being a sage, and even if his gift seems small or unimportant, he's ready to accept it. The priest stands at the altar as Alma looks out with a serious face, making a silent promise to repay his family for everything they've done starting right now. Suddenly, the priest yells out Alma's name to the whole room, officially starting the announcement while his dad watches from the crowd with a really intense look. Alma's mind is completely on his father and the rest of the Fellows family as they wait for the big reveal. The priest looks down at the results and starts to say exactly what Alma's gift is, but he trails off for a second, leaving Alma standing there with his eyes closed, just waiting to hear his fate. The priest stares down at the results. He's completely speechless and looks totally confused by what he's seeing. He looks out at the crowd, wondering how something like this could even be possible as the silence drags on. The crowd starts whispering and the vibe gets weird, so Alma's dad yells out, asking the priest why he's acting so flustered. His dad demands to know the result, and the priest stammers through the announcement, finally admitting that Alma doesn't have a gift. His father just stands there with a blank look on his face. He's so shocked he can't even say a word. Alma looks back as the reality hits the room. The heir of the fellow's family didn't receive a single gift, leaving him standing there with his eyes wide, completely floored by the news that he's basically powerless. He knows that having no gift is pretty much unheard of, and he can't figure out why this is happening to him. The crowd starts talking trash about how a sage's son could be such a letdown. It's so much pressure that Alma feels like he can't even breathe. The word incompetent keeps repeating in his head as he walks away, and the whole situation just feels incredibly painful. Alma stands there with a look of total disbelief on his face. He says there has to be some kind of mistake because the rules are simple. Every human is supposed to get a gift. As the priest and Lord Fellows start walking away, his dad says this whole thing is totally unheard of, but he seems sure of something. Alma watches him go, wondering if his dad is actually trying to look out for him. He starts thinking about the word effort, telling himself he's going to work as hard as he possibly can. He remembers his dad telling him how much he hoped Alma would be the one to take over his title as the sage, so he tries to stay positive, thinking that all his training still counts for something. He looks at his dad and says he'll do his best to live up to those expectations, but Lord Fellows just keeps walking. He says he's been watching Alma since he was a kid and knows he'll be an asset to the family, making Alma call out to him one more time, hoping his dad still cares about him regardless of what happened with the ceremony. But then his dad's face completely twists with disgust. He snaps and tells Alma to never call him father ever again. He keeps walking without looking back, asking Alma if he still hasn't realized just how much trouble he's in. The crowd is losing it, saying there's no way this is happening. Alma just stands there, realizing that no matter what the gift could have been, he's in serious trouble because Lord Fellows looks like he's about to blow a fuse. He points his hand away, looking at his son with nothing but disgust, and Alma is left standing there by himself in front of the big stone archway. He looks completely stunned, watching everyone turn their backs on him while his dad says that while having a bad gift is one thing, having no gift at all is a total disaster. People in the crowd start whispering that the third son is just a total failure and they start wondering if there's something wrong with the family bloodline. The noise of the crowd is getting louder, and someone asks if he can even hear all the trash they're talking about him, telling him he's gone and ruined the family name. Others just shrug it off, saying he's probably just a spoiled rich kid who never had any real talent to begin with, and they keep telling him shame on him. Alma's eyes are welling up with tears as he listens to everyone rip him apart. Then Lord Fellows yells out for everyone to hear. He says the Fellows family has zero use for an incompetent kid who can't even manage to get a single gift. He says Alma's name one last time, making it official. He tells him he's banished from the family forever, leaving Alma sitting in a tavern later on. He's looking pretty rough and out of it, just leaning over his drink and letting out a long sigh as he tries to process his life being ruined. Alma hears people nearby whispering about how that was the famous Fellows family they just saw, and he realizes the news of him getting kicked out is already spreading everywhere. He takes a drink while the worker mentions a pint costs 700 gold, which makes him think about the 50,000 gold his family gave him when they threw him out. He knows a place like that is no home for someone as naive as him. He slams his hand on the table, telling himself that he can't just keep drinking like this because he's desperate. Alma stands up but immediately starts worrying about how he's even going to survive on his own, and the stress finally gets to him. He just collapses right there on the floor. He lies there looking totally drained, staring off into space because it finally hits him that he's completely alone. He stares up at the ceiling and realizes he doesn't have a single ally left in the entire world, and since he doesn't have a family name or a gift to his name anymore, he feels like nobody is ever going to look his way again. Alma lies there on the floor looking totally wiped out. He just stares up and mutters about how everything is a bunch of crap. He starts wondering if he's actually lucky enough to see what happens next, laughing to himself about this being his so-called gift when a message suddenly pops up out of nowhere. It says his reincarnator gift has finally been activated. Alma's eye goes wide as he sees the screen. He's completely shocked and can't even process what's happening. So he sits up and asks what that voice in his head is, right as the system tells him he's about to get all his past life memories and powers back. He starts questioning everything, wondering what this gift even is and what the heck reincarnator is supposed to mean. But suddenly his status starts updating. He grabs his head and starts losing it from the pain while the system confirms the transfer was a success. Some guy sitting nearby looks over and asks what the hell is wrong with him, telling Alma he's definitely overreacting to the pain. The system doesn't slow down though. Another message pops up saying he's officially inherited offensive magic, and then it just keeps going. A bunch of notifications flood his vision, confirming he's now got defensive, recovery, support, and even space-time magic ready to go. The system notifications just keep flooding in spatial, spirit, and even forbidden magic are all successfully inherited, while Alma screams in pain as his old memories finally lock into place. He catches his breath and starts to realize the truth. It finally makes sense why he didn't receive a new gift during the official ceremony, because he honestly didn't need one. He realizes he's had his real power all along. But before he can even process that, a massive hand reaches out and grabs him by the face while he just looks on. Alma looks completely caught off guard as some guy starts losing it, screaming and demanding to know what the hell he thinks he's doing. Alma just stares back and casually asks what's wrong, while the guy points the finger and says Alma is definitely the one behind all of this. And looking around the room, it's a total mess. Every single person in the tavern is slumped over their drinks or face down on the floor, except for one guy in armor who's barely holding on. Alma realizes it's the sheer pressure of his own magic. Now that he's inherited his past life's power, it's leaking out everywhere. It turns out anyone nearby who isn't strong enough to handle that much raw energy just gets completely overwhelmed by the reincarnator's presence, leaving the armored guy shaking like a leaf, struggling to even stay on his feet while he tries to ask what Alma actually did to everyone. The armored guy is completely losing it, gasping for air while he asks Alma what the hell he actually is. Alma just stands there looking pretty awkward about the whole thing as the guy points out that he's somehow managed to knock out every single person in the place. He's sweating like crazy and staring Alma down, but Alma just holds up a hand and nervously tells him that there's probably just a big misunderstanding happening right now. The guy isn't having it and says there is absolutely no point in arguing about it anymore. So he lunges forward. Alma's eyes go wide as he realizes he has to move fast to avoid getting hit. Alma leans back to dodge the attack in the middle of the messy tavern, all while the truth about his gift, the reincarnator, starts to settle in. The armored guy keeps swinging with everything he's got, but the narrator explains that this specific gift is actually what Alma received during his very first life. It turns out that whoever holds the reincarnator gift only gets to use it for one single rebirth, and once that person turns 15, every single memory and ability from their past life comes flooding back, and right now, dark energy is starting to swirl around Alma's hands. Alma locks eyes with his opponent as he finally taps into his true power, the legendary dark magic he's been carrying this whole time. Alma focuses his energy and whispers the word hollow as his hand reaches out, triggering a massive skeleton made of dark smoke that towers over the guy, while people in the room just stand there gasping. Alma thinks about how he chose to be strong in his first life, and spent his entire second life refining those abilities until they were perfect, leading to the moment he realized he finally had every bit of magic he would ever need for the tavern, where everyone is now slumped over on the floor. As he looks down at his hand, he realizes this is where his new life actually starts. The next morning, rumors start flying through town about the son of the fellow's family being spotted at the tavern, but the guards are mostly confused, saying everyone inside was found knocked out and nobody has any clue how it happened. One of the armored guys looks up at the big buildings nearby and wonders if that would be the perfect place for someone to go into hiding. The guards are patrolling the streets, and one of them tells his partner to chill out since he's being way too serious about the search. But the guy reminds him there's a fat gold reward from the fellow's family if they actually find the kid, which Alma hears while hiding out in the shadows of a nearby alleyway. He realizes pretty quickly that the mess he made at the tavern is already being reported all over the place. Standing on a roof, Alma thinks about how he was exiled anyway, so he definitely can't stay in the Empire and needs to figure out a new spot to go. That's when he remembers the Kingdom of Familia is just to the west of where he is now, so he thinks about the place, a powerful monarchy that's been around for over 200 years and is just as big as the Empire, and he actually remembers having a safe house there in his past life, though he isn't sure if it's even still standing after 2 centuries. It really hits him that 200 years have passed since he was last around, and he realizes this whole Illistella Empire didn't even exist back when he was alive the first time. Alma looks out with a grin, thinking he's actually looking forward to seeing how much the world has changed over the last 2 centuries. The guards keep up their patrol, while Alma remembers there used to be a trade carriage on Carriage Street that headed west. So he drops down into a dark alleyway to stay out of sight. It's still pretty early, so the streets are empty, and he figures he should keep moving while the coast is clear. But Alma stops cold when he sees a familiar face. It's his brother Keith, who calls him incompetent and says he's been waiting for him. Keith stands right in the middle of the street, totally blocking the path forward. He brings up the fight at the tavern and tells Alma he's still a disgrace to the family name even after being kicked out. Keith starts charging up lightning magic in his hand, mentioning that their dad is pretty pissed off about the mess he made, But Alma tries to get him to wait a second, telling his brother the tavern stuff was just a total accident and a misunderstanding, because he really doesn't want to fight his own family. Alma tries to keep things peaceful, saying he'll just leave the Empire without making a scene, but Keith isn't having it. He tells Alma he hasn't changed at all, which catches the kid off guard. Keith admits he doesn't even care about what happened back at the tavern, and with a crazy look on his face, he tells Alma he wishes he could just beat him to death right here. Alma can't believe his own brother is saying this. He just stands there totally shocked as Keith starts gathering magic, saying he's actually always hated him. Keith loses it, calling him an incompetent bastard and telling him to die while he throws a massive blast of energy straight at Alma. But Alma stays calm, recognizing the move as a lightning ball, and even though it's a basic spell, he knows its real power depends on the guy using it. Keith is feeling himself, thinking about his title as the Purple Lightning Wizard and how nobody should mess with him, so he lets loose a huge blast that lights up the entire street, looking pretty smug about it. Keith figures he's finally finished things, but as the smoke clears, a giant slab of stone is standing right in the middle of the road, and it turns out Alma used earth magic to pull up a rock shield just in time. Keith is totally losing it, asking how the kid could even know how to use earth spells. Alma just stays chill and tells him he's been practicing in secret for a while now, which really gets to Keith since earth magic has a huge advantage over his lightning. He keeps asking when this even started. Keith starts spiraling, saying he's sick and tired of how Alma always acts like this, while he complains about how his little brother is always the one getting better results than him. Keith is venting about how much he hates being compared to his little brother, saying it actually makes him sick. Alma just listens while Keith brings up the moment he found out Alma didn't get a special gift from the gods. Keith starts laughing like a total psycho, admitting that hearing his brother was a failure made him feel great. He starts charging up energy, saying the family name would be ruined if a loser like Alma was allowed to live. With a creepy look on his face, Keith tells the kid he's going to finish him off right then and there. Alma recognizes the spell Keith is about to use and gets worried since there are still people nearby. But Keith doesn't care at all, yelling that he'll blast through a few bystanders if that's what it takes to win. He raises his hand and calls out his lightning magic, El Regan, letting the power build up. Alma realizes this thunder spear is meant to punch right through his earth shield, and he's really starting to panic because if any of those bolts go wide, the innocent people in the street are going to get wrecked. Keith has this totally insane look in his eyes as he yells for Alma to burn to ashes, and he lets the massive lightning blast go, causing a huge explosion that sends rocks flying everywhere. Smoke starts rising from the giant crater left in the middle of the street. Keith just scoffs at the destruction, thinking he's already won the fight, but he looks closer and realizes his brother is completely gone from the spot he just blasted. Keith starts losing his cool, yelling out and asking where the hell the kid is hiding, and he scans the rooftops in a total rage, but he can't see him anywhere. Alma actually shows up safely behind the crowd. He managed to move everyone out of the way. He used a no-chant teleport spell to get everyone to safety without Keith even noticing him move, though saving that many people at once without saying a word is really starting to wear him out. Alma looks at the smoking crater and thinks to himself that his brother Keith is actually pretty amazing, but he knows he can't let any more innocent people get caught up in this mess. Keith is sweating and looking around like a crazy person while Alma tells him he's sorry, but he's gotta take him down now. Alma just stands there with his hands together, getting ready to use a spell. Meantime, Keith is still standing in the street surrounded by lightning, screaming for Alma to show his face. Alma watches him and admits that his brother's lightning magic is definitely powerful. And even though Keith is putting on a big show of force, there's a massive opening, so Alma just shows up right behind him and casually says he's standing right there. Keith spins around looking completely shocked, asking when the hell he even got behind him, but Alma doesn't give him an answer. He just tells Keith that now it's his turn to attack. Keith calls Alma an idiot, saying there's no point in calling out if he's trying to do a surprise attack. But Alma just replies from the roof that he only told him where he was, because as far as he's concerned, the fight is already over. Keith looks up in total shock, barely able to even get a word out as Alma activates his earth magic, causing the ground to completely fall apart. He triggers a move called Rock Prison, and giant stone pillars shoot out of the dirt to trap Keith inside. Keith realizes he's totally boxed in by a wall of rock and he starts losing it, screaming at Alma not to look down on him while trying to break free. Alma doesn't flinch. He just adds lightning to his magic and uses press lock, causing the massive rocks to slam shut and crush everything inside. Keith is completely stuck in the rock prison, losing it because he can't believe Alma can use lightning magic too. Alma just looks at him and asks if he noticed what's actually happening, because turns out Keith's own massive lightning attack earlier ended up magnetizing all the minerals under the ground. Alma explains that he's just using his own lightning to boost his earth magic, making the trap impossible to break. Alma carries the kid he saved back to safety while his brother stays stuck. The older folks from the village are beyond grateful, telling Alma he's a total lifesaver and thanking him over and over, but Alma looks down, feeling guilty and apologizing because he thinks the whole fight was his fault. The villagers won't let him beat himself up though, and they tell him to raise his face, reminding him that no matter how it started, the fact is that he's the one who stepped up and saved them. Alma hears them and finally lets out a small smile, quietly thanking them as the tension finally starts to fade. Keith starts losing it from inside his rock prison, yelling at Alma to tell him what's going on. He demands to know when Alma even got this much magic in the first place, and asks if he's been hiding his real strength from everyone this entire time. Keith is spiraling, thinking about how he failed his father and couldn't live up to the sage title, then yells at Alma for looking down on him. He keeps barking at him to answer, but Alma just stands there looking completely bummed out. Alma starts thinking back to when they were younger. Keith used to show off his lightning magic and explain how it wasn't just for fighting, but could actually be used to move things around. Alma really looked up to him back then, thinking they were just two brothers working hard and having a bit of friendly competition, but seeing Keith's face now, it's clear that his brother feels totally defeated. With everything changing, Alma makes a huge call. He's leaving the Empire and heading east to get away from the continent for good. Alma tells Keith to please not come after him, then clarifies that he is actually heading west. He closes his eyes and thinks about how he never wants to see his brother's powerful lightning magic ever again. Keith loses it and yells at the top of his lungs that since Alma said west, he must be heading east. Keith keeps screaming that Alma is an idiot and that he'll hunt him down and defeat him no matter where he goes, making Alma smile and think about what a simple guy his brother is as he waves and tells him to take care. Alma walks away, becoming a small figure in the distance while everyone else just stands there. One of the guys looks pretty shocked and just says that Alma really went away. The scene shifts to a quiet part of town where a shopkeeper is just hanging out at his stall, and Alma is standing by a horse-drawn carriage with his gear, ready to finally get moving. The driver points the way out of town, and Alma gets ready to leave his old life behind. Alma settles into the back of the horse-drawn carriage as it starts its trip, leaning back while he looks around the interior, thinking to himself that this is his very first time riding in a carriage for such a long distance. Just across from him sits a girl with a ribbon headband who looks pretty focused, and as Alma catches a glimpse of her face, he realizes that he definitely saw her back in the plaza earlier. He starts to feel a bit awkward about the coincidence, especially when he notices her just staring him down, making him wonder if she's actually looking at him for a reason. Suddenly, a voice from outside the carriage asks for a moment of their time, catching the driver's attention as a couple of armored guards show up to explain that a dangerous wizard is supposedly hiding out in the area. The lead guard gets right to the point and says he needs to verify exactly who is on board. Alma and the girl both lean forward to see what the commotion is about as the guards start their inspection. The guard starts the check by asking the man in the vest if he has any ID on him. The man introduces himself as Tristan from the West Farms and says the woman next to him is his wife, while Alma starts to freak out because he doesn't have any ID, even thinking about using teleportation to escape before the guard shifts his focus toward the back of the carriage and asks the kids for their story. Alma is about to lose it when someone suddenly calls him brother. It's the girl with the ribbon, and she leans right in front of him to take charge of the situation. She holds up a card and tells the guard her name is Luna from the West Flanders territory, and then she points right at Alma, claiming that he's just her younger brother. The guard looks them over while Alma stands there sweating, hoping the lie works. Alma realizes she's totally bailing him out, probably as a way to thank him for helping her back at the plaza. The guard finishes up the check and tells everyone they're all clear to move out. The carriage starts rolling away, finally leaving the castle gates and the city behind. Once they're safe, Alma turns to Luna and tells her she really saved his skin back there, and then he introduces himself as Alma properly, mentioning he saw her at the plaza earlier. Luna looks a bit shy and mumbles an apology for whatever went down between them before. Alma just lets out a huge sigh, admitting that whole situation had him feeling incredibly nervous. But then things get weird as these glowing squares and lines start floating around him, while Luna just stares straight ahead with this sudden, intense look in her eyes. Alma catches a tiny whisper from her, and it sounds like she's saying the word teleport. He realizes she's definitely muttering something under her breath, right before everything changes. Luna starts muttering to herself, totally blown away by how someone could use high-level space magic on a whole group without even chanting. She keeps going on about the wide range of spells and the crazy good judgment it took to pull that off, looking deep in thought while she considers what it would mean if this person. The carriage hits a rough patch in the road, and she suddenly calls out Alma's name. Luna turns toward him with a serious look and says she's got a favor to ask. Alma doesn't look too shocked and just tells her he was actually expecting her to bring something up, but he still repeats the word favor back to her, sounding a little unsure as he waits for her to continue. Luna just stares him down, looking more determined than ever as she says his name one more time. She doesn't beat around the bush and tells him she wants him to come back to her territory with her. Alma looks pretty confused by the sudden invite and asks her why she's asking him specifically, while Luna just looks down, starting to explain that it's because of something important. Luna looks him right in the eye and tells him she has a job that only someone with his specific skills can pull off. Alma starts putting the pieces together. He mentions how that explains why she went out of her way to save him from those guards earlier, but the comment catches Luna off guard, leaving them both staring at each other in total confusion. She starts to panic a bit, waving her hands around while she swears she didn't mean for the job to be some kind of trade for helping him out. Alma can't help but feel like the timing for a request like this is definitely a little unfair, especially as Luna looks down, blushing hard while she mumbles about how she was really just trying to return the favor he did her. It's actually pretty funny to him, so he starts laughing until she asks what's so hilarious, though deep down, he's already decided he's down to help her. But he still has to consider the fact that people are chasing him. If those pursuers catch up, they're going to bring a lot of trouble to Luna's doorstep, and she seems to sense his hesitation, looking a bit down as she admits that the invite was pretty sudden. She makes it clear that he doesn't have to rush. If he has other things he needs to do first, he should go ahead and handle those. Alma sits quietly in the carriage, thinking about how there's finally something he actually wants to do. It reminds him of the choice he made back in his past life to train like crazy and master magic, all just to be happy this time. But looking back, he realizes he never really figured out what he wanted to do with all that power, so he decides to just ask Luna what happiness actually means to her. Luna looks a bit confused by the random question and asks why he's bringing it up out of nowhere, so Alma tells her it's just for reference, which makes her stop and think about it for a second. When she finally answers and says it's family, Alma can't help but look totally surprised by the simple answer. She goes on to explain how much she likes the people back home in Flanders, and admits that her biggest hope is just for her friends and family to always be happy. Then she looks over and asks if that answers his question, leaving him a little stunned by how clear her goals are. Alma thinks about what she said, repeating that she's happy when her family is happy, and he tells her that's a really nice way to live. Tristan suddenly speaks up from across the carriage, mentioning he knows Alma was having a rough time with his older brother. The two of them are caught off guard for a second, so Tristan apologizes and explains he couldn't help but overhear them talking. He gets a serious look on his face, admitting he doesn't know every single detail about what went down, but he finally just comes out and asks if it's true that Alma was actually kicked out of his own home. The carriage goes quiet while Tristan wonders out loud, asking if the whole point of this trip is just for Alma to get some kind of revenge. Alma looks down at his hands, gripping them tight while admitting that he definitely feels frustrated about how things turned out. He explains that even though he was betrayed and had everything he worked for taken away, there's still something holding him back, because he has zero interest in hurting the place where he grew up or the people living there, no matter what happened. Luna just looks at him with a soft smile, telling him she knew it all along, because he's just way too kind of a person. Alma looks down, admitting he just doesn't have the guts to go through with something like revenge, so he apologizes to Luna, explaining he needs some time to process her request and asks if she can give him one night to think it over. Luna says she gets it and tells him to just let her know what he decides tomorrow as the carriage rolls on. Alma looks over at her and thanks her for being so patient, and while the two of them sit there, he promises he'll definitely have a final answer for her by the next morning. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Keith is losing his mind and yells out for his father, and he's shaking with rage, demanding that his father finally give him the green light to go out and take Alma down. But right then, a maid steps into the room to give him an update on the situation, and she tells him that the Lord actually gave orders to bring Alma back home, which leaves Keith totally shocked. Everything shifted because the word got out. Keith was actually defeated by Alma in their fight. Lord Fellow sits in his library, thinking about how Alma's crazy high power level could actually help the family's reputation even if the kid doesn't have a gift. And back in the hall, Keith is absolutely losing it. He's clenching his fists so hard he's shaking, just repeating to himself how much he thinks this whole situation is total garbage. He realizes that if Alma actually comes back home, things will go right back to how they were, or maybe even get worse for him. So he looks back at the maid with a dark expression and starts spinning a lie, telling her he's heading east. But then he stops and gives her a specific message, telling her to make sure his father hears exactly what he has to say. Keith tells her to report that Alma is heading west toward the territory of the Familia, and the maid just nods and says she gets it. Keith stands there sweating, looking totally intense as the reality of the situation starts to sink in, because he knows he just crossed a major line by officially plotting against his own father. He thinks about how messed up his plan is, but he's also satisfied knowing he's now the only one who knows Alma is actually heading east. Keith clenches his fist against his chest, thinking to himself that there really is no turning back from the choice he just made, and he flashes a pretty dark smile while thinking about how he's going to make Alma pay for all the humiliation he's felt lately. He walks down the hallway laughing like a villain, not realizing that his fake report was actually 100% correct about Alma's route. So the family's pursuer ends up following Alma's trail to the west just like Keith said they should. But since Keith thinks he lied, he heads off to wander the east all by himself looking for a brother who isn't even there. Moving on to a short time later, the focus shifts away from the family drama because Alma is already making his way toward the next big stop on his journey, a place called Talistella. It's a massive trade city with busy streets and market stalls everywhere you look, and once he gets inside, Alma drops a pile of coins on a counter to pay for a place to stay. The guy behind the desk tells him he's all set with a room at the end of the hall for one night. Alma stands in his new room, thinking about how he just dropped 2,000 gold on the innkeeper and only has about 1,000 left. So he realizes that after ditching the empire, stopping here in the trade city of Talistella was basically his only choice. He starts stressing out, knowing that if he doesn't find a way to make some quick cash, his whole journey is going to hit a dead end. But the problem is that if the fellow's family already has guys out looking for him, he really doesn't have the luxury of wasting time on long quests. Alma stands by the window and wonders if he should just find a dungeon to dive into. But he immediately shoots that down, thinking there's no way a dungeon filled with that kind of loot would be anywhere near this place. As he says the word treasure out loud, a memory from his past life suddenly clicks. He holds up his hand as things start to change, and he focuses his energy to trigger his spatial magic, calling out the item box skill. A black cube appears right above his palm as a digital menu starts loading up with a welcome message. Then he looks over the dimensional storage space he just opened up, ready to see what he's got tucked away in there. Alma watches as his storage space reacts to his mana. The box size actually depends on the user's magical power, so he checks the contents and lets out a big sigh of relief. It turns out everything from his old life made the trip over just fine. He used to rely on this item box whenever things got rough in his previous life, but he never expected it to come in this handy right now. A bunch of monster materials and rare parts sit spread out across the bed, making Alma think that selling some of this should definitely fix all his money problems for good. But as he keeps scrolling through the list, he starts to realize he might have a bit of a problem. Some of this stuff is way too crazy. The inventory is packed with legendary gear like the Dragon God's sword and the Sea God's spear, and he knows that if he lets any of this out, it'll cause a total disaster. So he picks out one specific item, hoping that it won't be a big deal if he shows it around here. He tells himself it's just a normal material you get from hunting monsters, so it should be safe. But then he starts second-guessing himself, thinking it might actually be so rare that nobody in this city will even know how to price it. Alma figures he might as well give it a shot, looking at the monster part in his hand and deciding he'll just head over to the local guild tomorrow morning once they're open for business. He spends a moment looking out the window as the sun starts to set and birds fly past the buildings. While nearby, Luna is just laying there in bed, staring up at the ceiling with a lot on her mind. She whispers the word tomorrow to herself, clearly thinking about whatever the next day is going to bring. The next morning, the Talistella Adventurers Guild is already buzzing with activity as people gather to trade and take on jobs. Alma walks in and notices how crowded it is, which makes sense since this town is a huge crossroads for different countries. So he starts looking around for the place where they buy materials, but he's so distracted that he slams right into someone. A massive monster head hits the floor with a loud thump, and Alma immediately starts apologizing for the mess. The adventurer he hit groans on the ground while Alma keeps saying he's sorry, realizing he just knocked a guy over and dropped his kill. Alma looks pretty worried after the collision and asks the guy if he's doing okay. So the adventurer just laughs it off while sweating under the weight of his kill, saying he's the one who should be sorry because his heavy load blocked his view of the kid. Looking the guy over, Alma notices he seems to be around his own age and is wearing some pretty basic, cheap-looking gear that marks him as a total novice who just got his gift. He spots a fresh scratch on the guy's face and wonders if he got it fighting some monster. Then Alma bows his head and says he's sorry for getting the guy's monster materials all dirty on the floor. The guy tells him it's fine, saying the boar he hunted was a tough old beast anyway, and introduces himself as Raoul the Adventurer, flashing a friendly smile while mentioning that Alma definitely doesn't look like he's from this part of town. Alma introduces himself and explains he's just looking for a spot to sell off some monster materials he's carrying, so Raoul gives him a thumbs up and says he's headed to the exact same place, offering to show the kid the way. As they walk, Raoul is surprised to hear Alma came all the way from Alistella, while Alma admits he actually ran out of money on the trip. Raoul looks a bit tired from carrying his catch and asks if this is Alma's very first time visiting the guild, and then he follows up by asking if Alma is actually planning on signing up to become a full-time adventurer. Alma seems a bit confused by the way Raoul asked that, but he clarifies that he isn't there to join the guild. His plan is to just sell his materials for quick cash and then head straight for the familiar territory, thinking that it's a solid idea, but then he notices Raoul looking pretty nervous and asks if there's something wrong. Raoul tries to act natural and explains that this guild is way too crowded for its size, which has created a really messed up hierarchy among the members that's been giving Raoul a lot of trouble lately. Raoul admits that if Alma had actually wanted to join up, he would have tried his best to talk him out of it, which makes Alma realize that Raoul is actually a pretty nice guy. But then the older guy looks back and notices Alma is looking a bit rough. He assumes the kid took a real beating from the boar he's lugging around, and then points out that Alma has bruises visible all over his body, causing the kid to just let out a nervous sound. Raoul just laughs it off, saying the bruises aren't even from the hunt and he's not even sure how to explain it. Moving on, Raoul spots their destination and points out the receptionist waiting at the counter. The woman behind the desk looks up and asks if they're there to sell off some monster materials. She keeps things professional and asks Alma if he has his official guild registration card ready to go. It turns out the guild only buys from registered members, which leaves Raoul looking pretty awkward in the background. The receptionist mentions they can get his stuff inspected today, but only if he finishes the registration process first. Alma realizes he doesn't really want to deal with the whole adventure social ladder or any of that annoying drama, but he's starting to feel like he doesn't have much of a choice, just as Raoul taps him on the shoulder to get his attention, winking while he tells the receptionist he'll just lend the kid his own registration card for the trade. He tries to play it cool, telling Alma he can just sell the monster parts under his name since there's no way the lady behind the desk actually remembers every single face that walks through the door. But Alma just looks at him with a pretty unsure face, not feeling great about trying to pull a fast one right in front of her. It turns out he was right to worry because the receptionist speaks up immediately. She tells them she can hear every word they're saying since they're being way too loud, and Alma just stands there as she asks them to take those kinds of shady talks somewhere else next time. He can't help but think that Raoul is honestly the worst at being sneaky, though Raoul finally breathes a sigh of relief when she explains that it's actually not against the rules since the person who actually hunted the stuff is standing right there. She stamps the official documents with a loud thud and tells them to head over to the warehouse where the pros can take a look at everything at once. So they move to the back where the massive beast parts are tied up and hanging from the ceiling. The appraiser starts checking the quality, noting that while a normal beastly boar usually goes for about 5,000 gold, this particular catch might be a different story. The appraiser takes a look at the haul and lets Raoul know that since there are way too many boars on the market this year, the tusks and nails together are only going to fetch 3,500 gold, and Raoul just leans back with a grin, saying that's totally fine by him as long as it covers his next few meals. The old guy just sighs, noting that Raoul is the same as always, a guy who doesn't have a greedy bone in his body. He keeps inspecting the catch though, pointing out how the boar looks pretty shabby and the whole thing is honestly just a big mess. So he looks Raoul right in the eye and asks why he doesn't go after some bigger monsters for a change instead of wasting time on these little guys. He tells Raoul that his skills are clearly good enough to handle much tougher fights, but Raoul just brushes it off with a smile, telling the old man to stop worrying about him and take a look at what Alma is doing instead. The appraiser turns his attention to the kid but doesn't get it at all, saying it just looks like Alma is standing there playing with his hands. Alma doesn't even look up, just telling them to hang on a second because he's almost done making his selections, while the other two just stare in total confusion, since it turns out they can't even see the transparent magic board Alma is working with. Alma suddenly pulls a strange black cube right out of thin air while liquid drips from it. The appraiser and Raoul just stand there completely frozen, and Raoul starts losing his mind, screaming about where that thing even came from and asking if it's some kind of magic trick, but Alma just tells him it's definitely not a trick. The appraiser leans in close, his eyes wide as he realizes that the kid is actually using a legendary item box. He grabs Alma by the shoulders and yells that it's insane for someone his age to pull off such high-level magic. The other two just stand there looking confused, so Alma asks if the magic is really even that big of a deal, which totally makes the old man snap and yell at him for being so clueless. The appraiser explains that simply having an item box is a guaranteed ticket to becoming a world-class merchant, since Raoul gets all pumped up, telling Alma that he's even more incredible than he thought. Alma tries to play it down, saying it's just a convenient skill and he probably doesn't have any business talent anyway. But the appraiser cuts him off. He's staring at the stuff Alma just pulled out. Raoul takes one look at the items on the table and starts screaming, because he can't believe he's looking at a real fire dragon's tail and scales. The appraiser adds on that there's even a demon general's loincloth and some obsidian bear fangs in the pile. Alma catches the look on the appraiser's face and realizes that the items he pulled out aren't the kind of things you usually see around here, and he starts scratching his head, wondering out loud if maybe the materials just aren't actually worth that much money. The appraiser and Raoul both snap and scream right in his face that he's an idiot because the truth is the exact opposite of what he's thinking. The old man demands to know why the kid is carrying around so much rare stuff that you can't even find on the market, while Raoul mentions that a fire dragon is a massive rank threat, so Alma just nods along to their shouting. The appraiser keeps going, explaining how a fire dragon is so dangerous that low-level hunters would get burned to a crisp just by standing near it. But suddenly, the old man drops everything and begs Alma to let the guild buy it all right now. He starts rambling about how he knows Alma is probably planning to shop around at different places to see who gives him the best price, since he's terrified that if he misses this one chance he'll never see these items again. So Alma just tells him he's fine with selling it to them. The appraiser can't believe his luck and screams to make sure the kid is actually serious about the deal, which leads to Alma telling him it's totally fine, as long as the guy stops groveling on the floor like a crazy person. The appraiser starts getting really emotional while wiping his eyes, promising Alma he'll give him a great price if he can just have a moment to finish the job. So the old guy leans way over his desk, focusing everything he's got on checking out the rare materials. Raoul completely loses it and screams out the final price of 2.5 million, standing there with his mouth wide open. He tells Alma that he's never even seen that much money in one place before, and Alma can't really believe it either. Looking at the report, Alma realizes that just one piece of material is worth a total fortune, which means the stuff inside his item box is worth way more than he thought, so he figures it's best to keep his mouth shut about his past. The appraiser mentions how it's been a massive amount of time since he's handled anything of this quality, especially since it was kept in an item box where the condition stayed absolutely perfect. The old man starts sobbing again just looking at it. He tells the two of them to head to the front desk with the report since he doesn't have that much cash on him. So Alma gives the guy a polite bow and thanks him for being so helpful with the appraisal. The appraiser turns his back, sounding pretty choked up while telling Alma that he's actually the one who should be saying thanks. But then the receptionist yells out the 2.5 million price tag, making everyone in the guild stop and stare. Since they have to wait on the cash, the guys head out for food, where Raoul feels a bit bad that Alma's paying for his lunch, but Alma tells him not to worry about it, because there's no way the appraisal would have gone that well without him there. Alma even offers to pay him a commission, but Raoul just tells him to drop the formal stuff and use his name since they're the same age. They sit around the table finishing their plates, just killing time while the guild staff gets that massive pile of money together. Raoul starts asking questions between bites, wondering where Alma found such high-end materials and if he actually fought the monster himself. Alma realizes he can't exactly tell the truth about being a reincarnated prodigy, so he decides to keep his past life a secret, telling Raoul a fake story about how his parents gave him those items as a parting gift when they kicked him out of the house. Raoul takes the bait and looks pretty sad, telling Alma that it sounds like he's really been through a lot of trouble. Raoul feels bad for prying and apologizes for being rude, but Alma just brushes it off, saying that at this point, he's actually glad his parents kicked him out of the house. Raoul looks at him and laughs a little, telling Alma that he's a really strong person, noting that having such a positive outlook on things is a kind of strength on its own. He looks away for a second and admits that he wishes he had that same kind of strength. Alma notices something and asks if it has to do with the bruises he sees on Raoul's body, which catches Raoul off guard, making him admit that the old man at the shop said the same thing about how he can't handle fighting stronger enemies. He gets honest about his fear, explaining how his body just starts shaking whenever he's up against someone better than him. It's not like he doesn't have a shot at winning or isn't prepared for the fight, but the moment he starts thinking the enemy is stronger or that he might lose, his nerves just take over. Raoul explains that his body just freezes up on him, and he gets so stuck that he literally can't move, scratching his head while admitting that being an adventurer probably isn't the right fit for him. But Alma stops him right there, saying that if he's considered strong, then Raoul is definitely strong too. The comment catches Raoul completely off guard, leaving him standing there in total shock as Alma tells him he's one of the best guys he's ever met, especially since he spent the whole day helping strangers. He points out that being that kind of person isn't something most people can do easily, and any group looking to build a powerful party would be lucky to have someone like Raoul on their side. Alma thinks back on how he's always been a loner, even in his past life, and never really had a group, but he focuses back on Raoul, explaining that being sensitive to danger is actually what makes a warrior good. He finishes by saying that the adventurers who don't know when to quit are the ones who end up dead. Alma looks him right in the eyes and says Raul is going to be a top-tier adventurer one day, and he even says he'd vouch for him personally. Raul just stares back, looking completely moved by the support, thanking him for the compliment while thinking that Alma has a vibe that makes him seem way older than their generation. Alma realizes that's actually true, since living 100 years in his past life makes him over a century old now. The two of them just stand there in the guild for a second, but then some guy's voice cuts through the room, mockingly asking how a small fry like him is doing. A group of rough-looking guys walks in like they own the place, and right away Raul starts looking pretty tense, while Alma just stands there trying to figure out what's going on, until this massive dude with a huge scar across his face stops right in front of them, looming over the two of them before looking down and giving Raul a real casual greeting. Raul looks pretty shaken up, calling the big guy Evan and trying to explain that he was actually planning on paying this month's fee soon. But Evan just brushes that off for now, leaving Raul standing there looking completely confused about what the guy actually wants. He turns his attention to Alma, saying he heard about the kid who brought a ton of items to the shop earlier today, and he mentions how impressive it is that people even outside the guild are talking about him, while Raul just awkwardly agrees. Evan gets a real smug look on his face, telling them that this guild runs on a specific set of rules, specifically that all the adventurers here have to pay a fee so they can help each other out whenever things get rough. He leans in closer, telling Alma that since he's the new guy in town, he's going to have to cough up a registration fee right now, slamming his hand onto their table and looming over their lunch to make sure they know he's not joking around. His face twists up as he glares at Raul, asking him what the hell he thinks he's doing hanging out with this kid. But Alma just lets out a little smirk, looked him in the eyes and telling Evan that he's totally wrong about how this is going down. Raul tries to jump in and save the situation, telling the thugs that Alma isn't even an adventurer. He's just a client using the guild today. And since he's not a member, there's absolutely no reason for him to pay any of these fake fees. That doesn't sit well with Evan at all. His face twists up as he tells Raul he's really asking for it now. He grabs Raul by the head, mocking him for getting cocky just because they made some money, and says it's time for another beating. Raul screams for Alma to run while the kid just stands there, completely confused about what these guys are even talking about. Just then, the receptionist girl shouts across the room, claiming there's a mistake with the paperwork and Alma needs to come to the desk right away. She stares him down with a serious look, clearly trying to give him an excuse to get away from the trouble. Raul stands up, his chair scraping against the floor, and tells Alma to just go ahead while he stays behind to finish some business, giving the kid a friendly pat on the shoulder and a quick smile, telling him he'll see him around later on. With the tension finally breaking, Evan and his crew head for the exit, the heavy doors clanking shut as they leave the building. Alma stands there completely stunned while the receptionist avoids his eyes, looking totally stressed out. He looks down and realizes Raul handed him something right before he walked off with the thugs. And it's actually Raul's adventurer's card, leaving the kid wondering why on earth he would just give it away. Alma thinks back to how scared Raul looked just a second ago, and it's pretty obvious something is wrong. The receptionist leans in and explains that those three guys are actually some of the few B-rank adventurers in the city. She says that while they're top tier when it comes to fighting, their behavior is a total nightmare, and there are rumors they've been shaking people down for their rewards by calling them adventurers' fees. Apparently anyone who refuses gets turned into an example, but since they're so talented, the guild staff can't even step in. Alma looks at her and asks if she only called him over to the desk as a way to help him escape. She admits that Raul probably used himself as bait to let him get away, even leaving his card so Alma could still get paid. The receptionist slides a heavy bag across the counter, telling Alma this is the full payment for his materials. She leans in close with a serious look, giving him her personal opinion. She really thinks he needs to get out of there as fast as he can. Meanwhile, back in the alley, Raul is leaning against the wall completely spent. Evan stands over him, telling him it's time to just give up. Evan rumbles through Raul's stuff and complains that the guy barely has any money on him, and as he stares at the empty wallet, one of his thugs asks if they should just head back and grab that kid instead. Raul tries to hold his ground, but he's so terrified that his sword is literally rattling in his hand. The thugs just stand there laughing at him, mocking how much he's shaking while he tries to act tough. Evan gets right in his face with a nasty grin, telling Raul he should just stop fighting it and join them. He starts making him an offer, promising that if he helps them out, he'll get a cut of the money and maybe even a better rank. The plan is simple. Since the kid already trusts him, all Raul has to do is lure him into the alley and the thugs will do the rest of the dirty work. Raul tries to pull himself together and draws his sword with a sharp ring facing down the thugs. But Evan is way faster, swinging a heavy fist that catches Raul right in the face and sends him stumbling back while Evan just mocks him, telling him to stop acting tough and do what he's told or die. Raul is a mess, bleeding and gasping for air while his hands won't stop shaking. But then he starts laughing through the pain, telling the seniors that they have no idea what they're dealing with. Even though they just met, Raul knows Alma is on a completely different level than the rest of them. He thinks about how Alma can pull off high-level magic and find rare items like it's absolutely nothing. The kid might have been kicked out of his house, but he's got the mind and the vibe of someone way more important than a normal rookie. Raul thinks about how a guy like that actually looked at him and said he could be a first-class adventurer, so he grips his sword tight. Raul pulls his sword and stands his ground. He's not about to let Alma down now. Looking totally beat up, he tells himself he won't betray the kid's expectations. And then he decides that even if he gets killed right here, he's going to die as a real adventurer. But Evan is completely losing his mind with rage, looking like he's ready to wreck everything. Standing over the kid, Evan mocks him for trying to act like some kind of hero, while Raul lies in a pool of blood, and Evan says the guy is just a nuisance they should kill, so they can just use the slaves to find Alma later. Evan raises his sword to finish the job. Raul is barely hanging on, whispering an apology to Alma because he thinks he's just a failure. Everything starts fading out as he thinks that becoming a top adventurer was just a dumb dream. Just then Alma shows up at the top of the stairs, looking absolutely livid at what he sees. Raul looks up from the floor, totally shocked to see Alma standing there. He can't believe the kid actually showed up. Evan just smirks at the sight, laughing about how the kid was dumb enough to come here all by himself. Raul tries to warn him, telling Alma to run because these guys are the top-ranked adventurers in town and they're only after his money. But Evan tells him to shut up, stomping his heavy boot right into Raul's back. The impact is brutal, leaving Evan reminding his crew to keep the guy alive while Alma just watches, his face turning cold and serious. With a smug look on his face, Evan asks the kid if he's ready to hand over all his money yet. He figures $2.5 million is a pretty fair price for 2 lives, but Alma isn't exactly shaking. Alma just stands his ground, asking if Evan is really supposed to be the highest-ranking adventurer in this place. He looks the guy right in the eye and tells him he doesn't really look the part. And then Alma lets out a sigh, saying Evan is just the kind of guy who talks too much when the enemy is standing right in front of him. Evan's mood flips, and he tells Alma that it sounds like the kid is looking for a world of pain. He was planning on letting him walk if he just paid up, but now he's done playing nice. He lets out a loud roar, calling out for Peter and Jake to get ready. Peter catches a bottle of iron skin drug on the fly, quickly tossing the buff over to his leader while Jake closes his eyes and triggers his aggressive power magic, doubling down on the physical enhancements for Evan. Evan starts laughing as his muscles swell up and his skin begins to creak. He towers over the kid, saying a sword was never his real weapon anyway. To prove his point, he crushes the hilt of his own sword into dust with one hand, and then he starts bragging about how his arms are strong as an ogre's and his skin is way too hard for any blade to pierce. He looks down at Alma and tells him he doesn't have a chance in hell of winning this fight, but the kid just stands there looking bored. Evan loses his patience and charges full speed across the floor, and just then he swings a massive fist right at Alma's head, screaming at him to die while the kid doesn't even blink. Alma doesn't even move, he just reaches out and catches Evan's massive, powered-up fist like it's nothing, stopping the guy cold. Evan is completely stunned, barely managed to choke out a confused sound as he starts breaking into a cold sweat. The 2 lackeys watching from the side completely lose it, yelling about how it's impossible for a kid to just stop a hit like that. As he holds the giant back, Alma thinks to himself about how he used to think magic was his only strength in his past life. But he realizes the physical body he was born with this time is actually way stronger than any of the buffs Evan is using right now. To prove it, he pulls Evan in close and slams his forehead right into the guy's face, shattering his nose instantly. Jake and Peter just stand there with their mouths hanging open, totally paralyzed by what they're seeing. Evan is dazed and bleeding out of his nose, barely able to make a sound while Alma pulls his fist back for a real follow-up. And then he lets loose with a punch so fast it actually whistles through the air. The force of the hit is so crazy that Peter and Jake can only stand there and watch as their leader gets absolutely launched. Evan is face down in a massive crater in the back wall. Peter and Jake just stand there looking completely frozen. Peter realizes that even with all those magic buffs and strengthening drugs, Evan didn't stand a chance, so he calls Alma a total monster. Alma lets out a tired breath while his hand starts to throb. He thinks to himself about how he's still not that great at actually hitting people. Evan is in total denial, barely able to process the fact that he just got wrecked in only 2 hits, but he manages to let out a groan and starts forcibly dragging himself back up. Alma watches him, casually mentioning the guy is tougher than he looks. And as he huffs and puffs, Evan asks why someone with so much power would even bother helping a loser like Raul. Alma doesn't say a word, just stands there looking down while the big guy keeps asking why he's doing all this, leading Alma to actually stop and wonder why he's so worked up over a guy he just met today. It's a weird feeling for him, especially since nothing like this ever happened back in his previous life. Suddenly, Evan loses it and screams at his lackeys to take Raoul's head off the second he gives the signal. Evan laughs like a maniac and points right at Alma, telling him he knows exactly what's up and better not move a muscle. Then he gets right in Alma's face, screaming and asking if he's actually Raoul's friend or what. Alma just repeats the word friend. Under his breath, it finally starts to click that he really does want to be friends with the guy. He looks back on his past life and remembers how he never even had the chance to talk to people. And even in this life as a noble's third son, he had a social circle, but nobody he could actually call a real friend until now. He thinks about Raoul, just a solid dude who's always willing to stick his neck out for other people without worrying about himself. Everything suddenly becomes clear to Alma. He realizes that more than anything, he just wants people like Raoul to be happy. He thinks about the people back in his hometown of Flanders and how much he likes them. And it all boils down to one simple hope that he's been carrying with him this whole time, which is just wanting to make sure his friends and family are always happy. Evan looks at Alma and asks if he's got the gift of physical enhancement too, since he admits that the kid seems to have a bit more raw power than he does. But then he points to his head and says what really matters for an adventurer is knowing how to take advantage of everyone else and making sure every situation stays in your favor. He starts laughing like a psycho, saying that actually risking your life is just stupid because the fight is over before it even starts, leading Raoul to grit his teeth and ask what the hell he finds so funny. Alma just replies that it's nothing, he just thought things were the other way around. Right as a heavy thud hits the ground and Evan completely loses it, screaming at everyone not to move or he'll take Raoul's head off right then and there. Alma stays perfectly calm and tells the guy it seems like his view of happiness is the total opposite of what Evan thinks, making Raoul look on in total shock, while Alma makes it clear that one thing is definitely certain, as he looks him dead in the eye and tells him the fight is already over. Alma looks dead serious as he thinks back to how things were long before he even arrived at this place, and suddenly everything goes quiet. Evan and his guys just hit the floor hard. Alma casually asks what's even going on here, while the other guys in the back start screaming for Jake and Peter to wake up. Without breaking a sweat, Alma decides it's time to use his summon magic, and he brings out a creature called Nightmare right in front of Evan, who just stands there shaking while his world turns into a total disaster. Moving over to Raoul, Alma uses a recovery spell called Airy to get him back on his feet, and Raoul slowly sits up while rubbing his head. He is totally out of it. He looks around and asks what happened, only to see Evan pinned to the ground by these weird black creatures. Raoul just says Alma's name in total shock, but the kid just smiles and explains that those things are called nightmares, basically creatures that eat dreams. He goes on to say that they force whoever they're stuck on to see their worst fears, and then they just sit there and feed off all that terror. Alma explains that he actually summoned those creatures and hid them before he even showed up, and they won't be letting go until they've had their fill of fear, which leaves Raoul completely floored that the kid can even use summoning magic. Down on the ground, Evan is completely losing it, sobbing and crying out for his mom while the nightmare takes over. Alma starts laughing and wonders what kind of crazy stuff the guy is seeing, and while Raoul feels a little bad for joining in, he figures it's fine. Raoul looks over at Alma and offers a quiet apology, feeling like he failed since he was supposed to be the one helping the kid, but it turned out to be the exact opposite. He looks pretty down on himself, saying he's just pathetic for how things went down. Alma tells him it's not like that and explains he really just came over to return something Raoul dropped, which catches the guy off guard. He pulls out an adventure registration card and asks Raoul if this is the important thing he was looking for. Looking right at him, Alma promises Raoul that he's going to be a great adventurer one day and says he's 100% sure of it. Raoul is so moved he grabs Alma's hand to thank him, telling the kid he really owes him one for everything. Someone knocks loudly on the door, 3 quick hits that cut through the quiet morning. Luna cracks the door open and answers, looking pretty surprised to see who's standing on the other side. She asks what's the deal with those guys, and Alma explains he's just on his way to drop them off at the guild, but he really needed to make a quick stop here first before he finished up with them. With a serious look on his face, Alma tells her he's finally made up his mind about something, and it has everything to do with where she grew up. He makes it official right then and there, he's going to Flanders territory. The next morning, Alma struggles to sit up in bed, feeling a total hangover hitting him like a truck. It turns out that once they decided to go to Luna's hometown, the 3 of them had a huge departure party and drank way too much, so Alma touches his forehead and uses his status heal magic to wipe out the headache in an instant. Alma tells himself it's time to get up and get ready to head out, but then he looks over and sees Luna right there in the bed next to him. She's still half asleep, groaning and rubbing her eyes as she rolls over toward him. Alma completely freezes up, breaking into a nervous sweat as he stares at her, She just snuggles deeper into the pillows and sleepily tells him good morning, making him stutter out a reply. He tries to stay calm by reminding himself that she just forgot to book her room for an extra night. He had to let her stay with him, and he keeps swearing to himself that nothing happened. But then Luna blushes and says yesterday was pretty intense. Alma's head literally starts steaming as he totally loses his cool, so he begs her to stop joking around before his heart gives out, eventually finishing his story about how they ended up here. With the party finally over, they leave Talistella behind and start the long trip toward Flanders, which is Luna's hometown. Raoul is riding along with them, laughing at the story before asking if the two of them ever actually managed to stop by the guild. Alma just gives him a totally blank look, clearly having forgotten all about that part of the plan. Back at the guild, a loud voice rings out from inside the building, yelling an apology for all the trouble they caused lately. It turns out to be Evan and his crew, and they're all down on the floor in a full-on bow, looking completely defeated. Evan is a total mess, crying and snotting everywhere while he admits they've done some really terrible things to people. So they suddenly have a massive change of heart and start paying back every single coin they ever shook people down for. Raoul just laughs it off as Evan walks away, wondering what kind of insane nightmares those guys must have had to turn them into saints overnight. Moving on, Raoul mentions he just kind of rolled with the flow back there and asks Luna if she was actually okay with him joining up. Luna thinks about it and says more people would be helpful anyway, even mentioning that Raoul is surprisingly good at what he does. Raoul gets hyped and suggests they should just form a new party right then and there, which leaves Alma looking totally stunned because the idea of actually being in a party is something he never really thought about until this exact moment. Raoul starts to worry and asks if he's not allowed to join, but Alma just admits it's only because he's never actually been in a party before. Alma thinks back to his past life and how he spent every single day training all by himself, so he tells Raoul that joining a party actually sounds like a lot of fun and he's officially in. Raoul immediately loses it and screams that it's time to start a gift ranking competition among the members, which really catches the other two off guard, but Raoul just smiles and says he'll be the one to go first. He reveals that his special gift is the Gale Swordsman, an ability that Alma recognizes as being perfect for a vanguard since it speeds up sword training and gives a bit of wind magic. Raoul explains that this ritual is a big deal because the person with the worst gift has to pay for everyone's food, and Alma can't help but wonder why Raoul would turn a happy moment into such a stressful game. Raoul laughs, thinking he's already won the whole thing, before turning to Luna to ask about her gift. The mood shifts instantly as it's revealed that Luna actually holds the insanely powerful gift of a sage. Raoul is completely geeking out, yelling about how this is the very first time he's ever met a real sage. Meanwhile, Alma is just stunned by how rare this actually is, and remembers how much he wanted that gift for himself back in the day. It wasn't just him either, since both of his older brothers were obsessed with getting it too, showing just how much influence his father really had over the fellow's family. Luna just gives a cute little peace sign, while Alma tries to process the fact that he never expected to find someone with a legendary gift like that just hanging out in a place like this. Luna tries to be sweet and says the Gale Swordsman gift is actually pretty cool, but Raoul just looks frustrated since he was feeling pretty confident until she showed him up. Raoul turns to Alma next, betting that he's got some kind of ridiculous gift as well. He starts worrying he's the weakest link while Alma struggles to find the words, and the pressure really starts to sink in. Alma starts sweating, looking totally cornered by the question as all kinds of different conflicts and worries start racing through his head at once. Raoul and Luna just look at him confused, wondering what's wrong, while Alma worries that being honest about his power might make everyone feel awkward around him. But even though he knows he could easily trick them, he realizes he doesn't want to lie to his new friends. Seeing Alma struggle, Raoul steps in and tells him he doesn't have to force himself to say anything if he isn't comfortable with it, and he adds that if he ever changes his mind, he can just say it then. He looks over to Luna for a second to get her to agree, while Luna just looks at them and admits she really just wanted to brag a little bit herself. She says she's just being honest about it, and Raoul just gives them a big smile and thanks both of them for being so chill about the whole situation. Luna smiles back, promising that she'll eventually tell them both the full story one day. Alma realizes he's managed to find some really great friends, or maybe he's just lucky, but either way, they already trust that he's plenty capable. Even so, Raoul admits he's still curious about the limits of Alma's power. He knows about the item boxes, the summoning, and the teleportation, plus the fact that his general magic is already insane. He looks at Alma and straight up asks if there's actually anything he can't do, which leaves Alma thinking that it's a tough question, since with his magic, he can pretty much pull off anything he wants. Raoul then remembers there's a specific kind of magic used to reveal how strong someone is, and he asks if he should try it out on the two of them. Raoul thinks the idea sounds like a blast, and Alma's definitely down to give it a shot too, so they fire up the analysis magic, letting the appraisal light wash over the whole group to check their stats. After taking a carriage to a city near the border, they pass the checkpoint and start the rest of the trip on foot, heading into the woods while Luna keeps an eye on the map. Turns out it's a 2-day hike to reach her territory. They get a camp set up as the sun starts to go down, and Alma pulls out some food for everyone while noting that he found a bunch of camping gear from his past life sitting in his item box, so he figured he'd finally use it. It's a pretty sweet setup since his magic keeps all their food and water fresh the whole time. And looking at the comfortable camp, Luna remembers how she had to carry a giant, heavy backpack when she first left home. Raoul just laughs, telling her she's lucky because Alma is making this return trip way easier for her. Alma just smiles, thinking about how quiet the forest is without a single monster showing up to ruin the vibe. A massive white wolf watches the group from the dark trees, just sitting there, and Alma looks back, saying the name Fenrir to himself. He realizes that with a beast like that nearby, it's no wonder the other monsters are too scared to show up. Raoul says the food is great, and Luna agrees. She thinks it's nice to eat outside for a change, while Alma thinks about how smart and strong these Fenrirs are since they basically run the forest. Suddenly, he hears a voice in his head. It's telepathy, and Alma replies that he doesn't think he's ever met any Fenrirs before. The wolf says that's not the point, it just came over to see what kind of monster showed up in the woods. Alma asks if it's talking about him, saying it's pretty harsh to call him a monster. The wolf just looks at him and asks if he even knows how much magic he's putting out. Alma tells himself he's pretty confident in his magic levels, mostly because he spent his whole past life training like crazy, and Fenrir points out that his massive power has the whole forest freaking out. Turns out the monsters are terrified of him, and even the giant wolf admits he's feeling a bit on edge too, which makes Alma stop and think. He realizes that the thing all those monsters were actually scared of wasn't this legendary wolf at all, it was him the whole time. Ever since that mess at the bar, he's been trying to keep his magic from leaking out unless he's actually casting something. But clearly animals just have better instincts for this stuff than people. Alma figures he's messed up a bit by being so loud with his energy, so he decides to fix it right now. He pulls up a concealment spell called Nimlies, a trick to hide his presence, and stands there for a second, focusing his mind to lock all that power down tight. Fenrir is totally blown away. He says Alma's presence just vanished completely, like he's trying to track a cloud of mist. Back at the camp, Luna notices something is off too. She mentions that Alma's vibe just seemed to fade away, and she's left wondering what's actually going on. Raoul looks over and sees Luna acting strange, while someone nearby asks her what's the matter, and Fenrir watches them closely with narrowed eyes. He realizes the group has finally noticed his presence, and the vibe shifts. Raoul starts shaking while Luna just stares ahead in shock. Raoul can barely get his words out. He stammers that it's a Fenrir, a legendary S-class monster, standing right there in the middle of the woods. He finally connects the dots and realizes why the forest was so quiet. It was a bad sign all along. Raoul yells for everyone to get back, but Alma stays completely chill. He tells Raoul to relax since the wolf isn't hostile, even though it's his fault the other monsters stayed away. Just then, a loud rustle comes from the trees, something feels off, and someone wonders what's actually happening. As they sit by the fire with the massive wolf nearby, Alma notices something. He feels a weird pressure coming from Luna that he's never felt before, and the air starts to glow. Luna gets a serious look as light swirls around her. A huge, glowing spirit shows up behind Luna, some kind of divine figure. Luna locks in and calls out for grace, her eyes showing she's ready to let loose. A giant spirit shows up behind her as she fires off a massive blast of white energy that fills the whole area. Fenrir the wolf is totally caught off guard by the sudden power move. He just stares at Luna, who looks just as shocked as he is by what she just did. Alma realizes he ended up disarming the attack on reflex, while a thud hits the ground, and Fenrir wonders if the girl's reaction was even necessary. Alma looks up at the massive wolf and says he's sorry, explaining that Luna just got a bit spooked, and he follows up by saying he hopes the wolf can find it in him to forgive her. Fenrir stays cool and actually apologizes back, saying he was the one being rude by showing up in the middle of the night like this. Alma tells Luna the wolf isn't a threat, since he could have taken them out before they even noticed him if he wanted to, and Fenrir agrees that's the case. The giant wolf watches her closely, though he can't stop thinking about that strange magic she just used or where it came from. Luna's looking pretty wiped out after that last move, and Fenrir notices her magic wavelength felt a lot like summoning magic. But before they go further, the giant wolf sets the record straight, telling Alma she's a girl and not a guy. Alma feels bad and apologizes, while Raoul watches from behind a tree, completely losing it over the fact that Alma can actually hold a conversation with a legendary wolf. Alma casually mentions they're just using telepathy, which makes Raoul feel even worse about his own skills, complaining that a kid knows way more magic than a sage like him. Raoul finally gathers enough courage to ask why Fenrir even showed up at their camp in the first place, and the wolf explains the real reason. She says there's someone else who's dying to meet Alma. Apparently, this individual has a major interest in Alma being around, making Alma agree to the meeting, though he's definitely surprised that a beast as big as Fenrir would travel all this way just to deliver an invite. It leaves Alma wondering just what kind of insane, high-level person is out there that can actually boss around a forest lord like her. But Fenrir just shows her appreciation and asks if he's ready to go meet him right now. Fenrir looks on as she drops a major reveal, explaining that the little creature with her is actually her son, and the moment Luna sees the little guy, she loses it, while the pup just stands there wagging his tail and waving a paw. Raoul is totally blown away, yelling about how amazing this monster is as the pup just sits there looking adorable, and Alma can't help but chime in, telling the little wolf that he doesn't look scary at all, which makes Raoul look pretty stressed while Luna just keeps shouting about how cute the little guy is. The pup rolls over onto his back to show off his belly, talking back to them and reminding everyone that he's a Fenrir too. He tries his best to act like a big shot, laughing and asking the group if they're finally scared of him yet. But it totally backfires because the whole group just stands there thinking about how he's way too cute to be threatening, and Raoul eventually gives in and starts petting him, asking the little wolf if he's hitting the right spots. Raoul is blushing like crazy while he talks about how fluffy the wolf is, and Luna just holds the pup close, completely focused on the fur. The little wolf pup is loving the attention, demanding more pets while Raoul notices he's in a great mood, and Raoul can't help himself, yelling that he wants a turn to pet the fluff too, but Alma moves on to talk with the mother Fenrir, who gets serious and asks Alma why someone like him is in this land. Alma starts to answer but stops short, realizing he hasn't actually asked Luna for all the details yet. So he just tells the giant wolf that he's got some business to handle in the territory further ahead, which makes Fenrir think, warning him that the forest monsters might be out raiding the farm fields there. Alma is surprised to hear about monsters causing trouble, and as he listens to the chatter, Fenrir explains that the forest hasn't been giving much of a harvest lately, forcing the creatures to go and wreck human settlements just to find enough food to survive, leaving Alma standing there for a moment, just thinking about how bad things have gotten for the people nearby. Alma looks out at the landscape, thinking about how Tonatart was just a small place and figuring Luna's home territory is probably a lot like it. So if a tiny territory like that got hit by monster raids, things would get pretty rough for the people living there. He realizes that while everyone heads to the kingdom, these rural spots are struggling and losing people, which makes him wonder if the request Luna has for him is actually connected to all these problems. Alma starts coming up with a plan, thinking that instead of just going out and killing monsters, he should do something more, so he thanks Fenrir for the heads up while the giant wolf just hums in response. Fenrir asks what he's planning and offers to tell the forest monsters to back off and leave that territory alone, but Alma just smiles and says it's fine, because he's actually going to use this whole mess to his advantage. The giant wolf stares him down, repeating the word use, and asking if he's planning on doing something shady. Alma doesn't give anything away, just looking back at the wolf and telling it not to worry about it. Alma gives a small smile, mentioning how he hopes his plan doesn't hurt anyone and ends up being good for everyone involved. And after hearing that, Fenrir says he'll take his word for it, mostly because he thinks Alma has the clearest mind of any mortal he's ever met. Alma sounds pretty surprised and asks the giant wolf if he can actually read minds, but Fenrir just brushes it off as a matter of experience, leaving the kid looking a bit confused while the wolf explains he's been around for 1,000 years and seen all kinds of people, so he can tell a guy's character just by looking into his eyes. Alma realizes something and points out that for a monster lord, Fenrir must actually really like humans, which the wolf admits is probably why he keeps his territory so close to where people live. Before heading off, Fenrir tells Alma to come find him if he ever needs anything since he still owes him a big favor. The little pup gets all excited and shouts that he wants to go to the village too, but his dad shuts that down immediately, and after the two wolves take off, everyone finally settles in for the night. Alma thinks back on what Fenrir said. He feels like the wolf's talk about a debt is a bit much since he just found the guy's son. The morning sun comes up and the campfire from the night before is nothing but cold charcoal, so the group gets moving, walking down the forest path toward a gate in the distance. They finally reach the Flanders territory, a simple village with thatched roofs and dirt roads, and Alma stops for a second, looking around and realizing this quiet little place is where Luna is actually from. Luna doesn't waste any time and tells them to follow her as she starts leading the way, walking past the small houses and fences, while the rest of the guys keep pace right behind her. Alma keeps looking around at the simple tools and the rustic setup of the village, and Raoul laughs a little, saying it's crazy quiet out here, way more rural than he ever imagined. Alma agrees it's definitely still, but he looks like he's starting to pick up on a weird vibe from the area. The sun starts to set over the mountains, casting a warm glow over the simple houses. Alma and Raoul stop to take it all in, looking around at the scenery with total wonder. Luna notices them lagging behind and turns back, asking if something is wrong. Raoul gets a bit flustered and says it's nothing, claiming he and Alma were just talking about how nice the area is. Alma agrees, saying the whole village feels incredibly peaceful and quiet. Luna smiles gently and says he's right, adding that the people here are great and it's a nice place, so she tells them to keep moving, leading the guys further into the heart of the village. Alma watches her and thinks about how much Luna must love her hometown and the people living here. He decides he's actually pretty excited to finally meet and talk to the people of this territory. And just then, they reach a massive wooden building that stands out from everything else. Raoul is stunned. Luna leads the group inside the building and calls out that she's finally back home. But as soon as she steps through the door, a younger girl sprints over and tackles her. The hit is so hard it completely knocks the wind out of Luna, leaving her coughing. The momentum sends them both rolling across the room until they hit the wall while Alma watches, and the younger girl just pins her down and excitedly yells welcome back. She leans in close to check on her, asking if she's okay or if she ended up getting sick. Then she explains how worried she was about her getting back safely since Luna has no sense of direction. Luna mumbles that she can at least find her own house, but her sister just laughs it off. And when Luna complains about her clothes getting messed up from the tackle, the girl tells her no excuses allowed, while Alma realizes he's just met Luna's little sister. Luna starts the introductions, telling Sanya that Alma is there to help them out, and then she points over to Raoul, calling him an extra before finally introducing Sanya to Alma. Alma gives a friendly greeting and says they'll be around for a bit, so he hopes they can get along, but Sanya just stares him down with a suspicious look, barely managing a quiet hello. Later, a man with a thick mustache welcomes them, thanking the group for coming out to their remote land. He introduces himself as Eric and says the woman with him is his wife, Mabel. It turns out Eric is actually Luna's father and the lord who runs this whole territory, and both he and his wife are incredibly nice, making the group feel totally welcome in their home. Everyone gathers around the table for a warm meal as they talk together, even though it seems like one person in the room is still holding a bit of a grudge. Luna turns to her little sister and says her name, trying to get her to show some manners, but she just keeps going, explaining that Alma and Raoul came all the way from Talistella at her request, though Raoul isn't too happy about being mentioned as an afterthought. Luna tells Sanya that her attitude toward their guests isn't okay, which makes the girl gulp and look away while pouting. But then Sanya repeats the name of the city to herself, and it looks like something finally clicks in her head. She asks if Luna was actually supposed to be looking for a strong fighter in the labyrinth city, Labastella, a question that leaves Luna totally shocked. Sanya points out that Talistella is just a commercial town and tells her sister she should have done some research before leaving, while the lecture continues with Sanya saying this is exactly why Luna shouldn't travel alone. Luna just sweats and tries to play it off by saying everyone makes mistakes. Luna is getting completely overwhelmed by the scolding, and it honestly makes Sanya look like the big sister in this situation as she keeps laying into her. After finishing her rant, Sanya huffs and turns away, leaving Alma standing there in a totally awkward silence. It's pretty clear that Sanya is on edge and doesn't trust the newcomers at all, and there's definitely a big reason behind why she's acting so defensive toward everyone. One of the local farmers looks totally miserable as he explains how monsters have been wrecking their fields lately, so even though they tried putting up scarecrows to stop the damage, it didn't do a single thing to help them. By the next day after getting to Flanders, things aren't looking much better, but Alma heads out with Eric to meet the locals and actually hear what's been going on in the village. The stories are all the same. The monsters have been way more active over the last few years, and Eric listens as they explain that a farm nearby just got attacked the other day. To make matters worse, the ground here is completely barren and dead, which means that even though no one's been killed yet, the lack of crops and money is just keeping everyone trapped in poverty. Eric looks pretty beat down as he admits that despite being the lord here, he can't fight or do anything to help the crops. And honestly, it's just plain infuriating for him to be so helpless while his people suffer. Watching him, Alma can see just how much the guy actually cares, realizing that behind that gentle face, Eric's got a huge amount of passion for everyone living in his domain. It makes sense to Alma that Luna probably grew up watching her dad feel this way, but suddenly Eric snaps out of it, apologizing because the pressure of the situation just got to him for a second. He tells Alma he's genuinely happy he made the trip from the other region, and hopes he takes his time getting settled, So Alma just watches Eric's reaction while Luna starts giggling at her dad's sudden change in mood. Eric tries to get things back on track, mentioning that before long he'll be making some moves, leading the group deeper into the woods as they keep talking about the future of the village. The girl stands among the trees, looking deep into the forest. Alma thinks about Sanya, wondering if a kid like her really has errands to run all the way out in the woods. He turns to Eric, bringing up the fact that he mentioned the monsters around here have been getting pretty active lately. Eric confirms it, explaining that the poison lizards are the main worry right now since they're busy storing food and getting ready to spawn. Out in the forest, Sanya clenches her hand as she reminds herself that going near the nest is strictly off-limits. But she spots something through the trees and realizes she finally found what she was looking for. Right there by a huge hollow tree, a bunch of poison lizards are just crawling around. Sanya hunkers down in the bushes, making sure she stays upwind so the monsters don't catch her scent. She pulls out some sleeping pollen and tosses it into the air, watching the dust cloud float toward the nest. It works perfectly, so she starts sneaking past the sleeping lizards, telling herself to just keep moving slow. Sanya peeks over the rocks, thinking everything is going exactly as she planned, but then she starts worrying about how she'll carry everything back alone, wishing she'd brought her sister. Suddenly, a poison lizard leaps out with a loud hiss, catching her completely off guard. Sanya panics, wondering why it's awake when her sleeping pollen should have kept it down for hours. The lizard doesn't wait and spits a glob of nasty poison straight at her. It barely misses, hitting a nearby tree and melting the wood right off the trunk. The monster looks confused about missing its shot, only to see Alma sitting calmly in the branches. Alma jumps down and asks Sanya if she's alright, while she just stares at him in total surprise. He explains that one lizard was likely already asleep, which slowed its breathing and let it ignore the pollen. Alma gives her a smile, saying he's just glad he followed her, and asks if she can tell him the whole story. Sanya just stands there for a second, looking like she's got a lot on her mind, before she finally finds her voice and thanks Alma for stepping in to save her. Alma asks why she'd even risk going near that nest again, wondering if she was after the eggs, but she tells him he's wrong. She explains that she was actually trying to get back the crops that the monsters stole from their village, which totally catches Alma off guard since he didn't think lizards would even want plants. He thinks back to when the Lord mentioned the monster raids, remembering how the guy didn't actually seem that stressed about it. Alma suggests that hunting wild beasts for food would be way easier, but Sanya gets intense and says that's not good enough. She looks him right in the eyes, telling him that if things don't change soon, the pressure will get to be too much, and her father is going to lose his entire position as the Lord. After letting it all out, Sanya's energy finally hits zero and she falls into a deep sleep. Eric stands in his office with his back to Alma, realizing that Sanya must have already spilled the beans about their situation. Turning around to face him, he admits that it won't be long before he's stripped of his title as the Lord. Alma just stares back, thinking to himself that the girl actually only told him a tiny bit of what was going on. So Eric keeps going, explaining to the whole group that their territory hasn't been able to pay any tribute to the crown for years now. He talks about how they were supposed to send crops to the capital every year, but bad harvests and monster attacks ruined everything, leaving the higher-ups at the capital whispering that he's just not cut out for the job anymore. He looks down, mentioning that an investigator is showing up in just 3 days and he was hoping to have a harvest ready by then. But the monster problem has only gotten worse lately, with creatures constantly wrecking whatever they try to grow. It all finally clicks for Alma. He sees why Sanya was being so reckless trying to deal with those monsters herself. Alma raises a hand, telling Eric that he might have a temporary fix for their problem. Alma tries to help out, asking if they could just buy crops from other towns to use for the delivery. But Eric's wife, Mabel, steps in and explains that they already thought about that. She shows them the storage, saying they need 5,000 gallons of crops, but even if they took every last bit from the whole territory, they'd only have 1,500 plus. Everything has to be at least grade B quality, and they just don't have the money to buy that much from anywhere else. Eric looks completely defeated, mentioning that with only 3 days left, he's totally out of options and knows he'll probably be exiled or charged with hurting the country's interests. But Sanya suddenly yells out that her father did nothing wrong. Eric just looks at her, but Sanya is clearly fed up. She turns on Alma's group, telling them they've seen plenty of people show up acting like they want to help. She explains that advisors usually just talk a big game to trick her dad since he's so nice, only to steal their money and run away, leaving them stuck with barren land that's constantly being destroyed by monsters anyway. Sanya keeps yelling that none of this is her father's fault and that there are just too many bad people out there. She breaks down, clutching her head and wondering why her dad has to be the one suffering like this. Eric calls out her name as he stands over her, watching his daughter sob on the floor while he gently pats her head. He tells her he's proud of her for getting angry for him, but explains that being a leader means believing in people and taking responsibility when things go south. Luna just watches them with a pained look, feeling the weight of the situation as she looks from her father to her sister. Alma stands by the door taking it all in, wishing he could have made it back sooner to help out. He realizes they need 3,500 gallons of crops to fix this, a number that clearly hits him hard, especially since he knows his own item box doesn't have anywhere near that amount of food stored. Looking at the family huddled together in total despair, Alma decides he just wants to find a way to make them happy again. Eric looks up at him, admitting he has no right to ask for help when he can't even offer a reward, but he's clearly at the end of his rope. Eric looks down, looking pretty crushed as he asks Alma to look after the people here once he's gone. He wants Alma to share his wisdom with the village for whoever takes over as the next lord, and he admits the place is struggling, but says it's only because he was a fool of a leader. The people living here don't deserve to suffer for his mistakes. Alma just stares at him, realizing that even when Eric has lost everything, the guy is still only thinking about the safety of his people. Suddenly, Alma looks Eric right in the eye and tells him he can handle it. Eric's eyes light up and he can barely believe what he's hearing, asking if Alma is actually serious. The guy lets out a massive sigh of relief, saying he can finally relax knowing the territory will be okay even after he's forced to leave. But Alma stops him right there, saying there isn't going to be an after because he's not letting Eric go anywhere. He knows it might be a bit selfish, but he's already decided to step in. He opens up his item box right then and there. A bunch of stuff starts dropping out of the air and hitting the ground with a loud thud, and Eric just sits there on the floor, completely stunned. He looks up at Alma, totally confused and asking what on earth is happening. Alma gives him a calm smile and tells him that in just 3 days, he'll have everything sorted out so Eric can fix this mess. He's determined to make sure this man stays in power as the Lord. To do that, he knows exactly what he needs to produce, 3,500 gallons of crops to save the day. Alma looks over the pile of goods and says the quality seems fine to him, but Eric is just standing there completely floored by what he's seeing and unable to find any words. Raoul doesn't hold back his excitement, grabbing Alma by the shoulders and yelling his name while Alma just tries to process the sudden outburst. Luna watches the scene unfold with a worried look, quietly saying Alma's name while Sanya stands right next to her, both of them clearly feeling the weight of the situation. The clock is ticking because the kingdom is sending people to investigate in only 3 days, which doesn't leave them much time. Alma looks down at the dry, ruined earth in his hands and tells everyone they need to start getting ready right this second. In a memory of the meeting, Eric looks totally desperate as he asks Julius if he actually wants them all to die. He keeps pleading with him, bringing up how much they've actually done and sacrificed for the country over the years. Eric calls the whole situation outrageous and begs him to think about the territory, and more importantly, the people living there who have nowhere else to go. But Julius isn't moved at all, calmly explaining that if you look at a country like a living thing, you have to be willing to cut off the infected parts to save the rest. He makes it clear that if they don't make the hard choice to get rid of the struggling areas, the entire country is going to end up doomed. Eric realizes they've hit a wall and says there's basically no point in talking anymore, so he signals his men blades are drawn and magic flares as they ready for a fight. One of the knights leans in and asks Eric if he's actually serious about this, considering who they're up against, but Eric is just trying to figure out their next move. He drops the formal tone and yells at Julius to get ready, calling him out as the great sage while he gets overwhelmed as massive ice spikes erupt and freeze everyone instantly. It's a reminder to everyone that Julius is officially the strongest wizard in the entire kingdom. And after the dust settles, Edward calls Eric a sinner for hiding taxes and orders the guards to put his head on a spike at the front gate. As they walk away from the carnage, Julius calmly asks Edward what's next on their list, and Edward gets a serious look on his face, saying he wants to go over some personnel issues regarding the Flanders territory. The two of them head deeper into the palace, leaving the mess behind. The sun shines over the massive palace walls as Julius walks through the quiet garden paths, looking like he's got a lot on his mind, while he turns to Edward and asks for an update on how things are looking over in the Flanders territory. Edward admits that while the harvest is almost ready for delivery, the remote location makes it a huge headache to get everything organized on time. But Julius doesn't seem worried at all. He just nods and says everything is moving along exactly according to his plan. Edward points out that despite being so far away, Flanders is a strategic chokepoint between the Western empires, so they have to keep it under their thumb in case things go south. And then he makes it very clear that if the local lord tries to block them, he should just be eliminated without a second thought. He closes his eyes and tells his subordinate that he's trusting him to handle the rest of the dirty work however he sees fit, Cut to the edge of the territory, where a guy named Cedric finally arrives, looking around at the trees and noting that he's officially in Flanders. As the royal court's appraiser, Cedric adjusts his monocle and wonders out loud if this is just another boring, middle-of-nowhere province, until a local guy shows up and bows deeply, thanking him for traveling all that way to visit them. As they walk, someone mentions the local lord is welcoming them with open arms, and then Eric gestures for them to follow him, leading the way through the trees while Edward looks pretty skeptical, thinking to himself that the guy sure can afford to be generous right now. He remembers the reports saying these people weren't even close to their quota and were likely mixing in scraps to fake the volume, but then Eric stops and tells them they've arrived. Eric points out the massive crates and says there are 5,000 kilogallons of crops here exactly as requested, and it's definitely not the junk Edward was expecting. Edward is totally sweating now, asking what the hell is going on, but Eric just looks at him and says there's actually one big problem with the harvest. He scratches his head and admits it was supposed to be grade B stuff, but most of it actually turned out to be grade A, making Edward wonder how that's even a bad thing. Edward is just standing there in shock, muttering about how this has to be nonsense while Cedric tries to get his attention. Cedric picks up one of the potatoes and takes a good look, confirming that Eric is actually telling the truth about the quality. He can't believe his eyes, saying it's just wild to see this many rank of crops gathered together in one place like this. He looks at the shining produce and admits he's been the kingdom's appraiser for years, but he's never seen anything like what's happening in Flanders. Edward is totally losing it, saying it's impossible since Flanders shouldn't have the money or tech for these crops, and he starts asking how they did it when Cedric chimes in saying he'd love to know the secret for his future studies. So Eric tells him to let the expert explain everything. Alma stands there with a confident look on his face, looking like he's got everything under control while he greets Edward for the first time with a polite smile, being as nice as possible before he introduces himself as Alma Fellows. But then he catches himself and corrects it, telling the sweaty and stressed out Edward that he's actually just Alma now. Edward recognizes the name Fellows from the Eastern Empire's nobility, just as someone explains that Alma is working as an advisor for the territory. Alma tells the group to follow him, jokingly mentioning that Edward looks way too intense for a simple farm checkup, leading them along until Edward admits the fields look incredibly rich, while Cedric can't believe they still have a huge surplus after everything they already gave the kingdom. Alma just looks at them and casually mentions that the crops they're seeing right now were actually just planted earlier that morning. Edward and Cedric completely lose it, with Edward shouting back to double-check if Alma really meant everything was planted just this morning, and Cedric is just as stressed, yelling that there's no way plants could grow from seeds to full size in less than a single day. It turns out the secret is a special liquid that was spread across every single field in the entire territory, and the inspectors recognize it immediately as the legendary fertilizer of the harvest god, a crazy item that makes crops grow at an insane speed. Cedric gets right in Alma's face, desperately asking how he could possibly get his hands on something that legendary and precious. Alma just looks confused and asks if the stuff is actually that big of a deal, while Cedric tells him he's only ever seen it mentioned in old books. Cedric continues the history lesson, explaining that this fertilizer doesn't just work fast. It actually keeps the soil rich and perfect for the next 100 years, which has the local farmers standing there with their mouths hanging open, barely able to repeat the idea of the land lasting that long. Raoul looks at Alma and laughs, saying it seems like the kid even has a natural talent for farming to go along with his magic, but Alma just shrugs it off, telling them he doesn't have any special talent and just happened to have a rare item in his bag. One of the visitors has been curious for a while and asks Alma what those things are, and Alma just nods as the guy points out all the weird stones sticking up across the field. Alma tells them it's actually a crystal of magical essence, which just leaves the visitor confused, and Alma jokes that a scholar probably knows this already, but starts explaining how soil nutrients are everything, telling them that the absolute most important thing in the dirt is the Earth's magical essence. He explains that this magic essence is basically a tiny particle found in every single thing, and since it's in the air and the soil, the crops get much better by soaking it up. By putting crystals in the field, Alma says he can force the crops to be top quality, leaving Cedric completely speechless as he tries to process that such a method is even possible. The scholar is visibly shaking, realizing that what the kid just described is totally groundbreaking. Cedric is literally shaking. He can't believe he never thought of a method like this until now, and he keeps repeating the words magical essence to himself like he's trying to solve a puzzle. He starts explaining that magic essence is usually just floating in the air or the dirt. It's not something that just turns into crystals naturally, but back when adventurers were a big thing, people only found these crystals in the deepest, most dangerous parts of dungeons, making them way too expensive to ever use for something like farming. He looks Alma right in the eye and asks how a kid like him even got a hold of something so rare, which totally freaks Alma out. He obviously can't say it's a trophy from a dungeon he beat in his past life, so he just lies and says he got it from some guy he knows. Cedric figures that whoever gave it to him probably had no idea how valuable it actually was. Though that isn't the only thing on his mind, he's still got another huge question for the kid. He says the quality of the crops makes sense now, but the math doesn't add up. There's no way this tiny village has enough people to plant and harvest everything so fast. So he asks Alma if they hired a bunch of outside help to get the job done, but Alma just tells him no. Alma tells Cedric that the kingdom's representatives are pretty resourceful, and then mentions he actually told his help to hide so he wouldn't scare his guest, which just leaves Cedric standing there completely confused, wondering what the kid is even talking about. Suddenly, a whole pack of wild boars and wolves shows up right in the middle of the fields. Cedric absolutely loses it, panicking because there are actual monsters standing right in front of him. Alma stays perfectly calm and explains these are the same monsters that used to attack the village, but now they're under control working the fields in exchange for food. He shows off a massive stone slab called the Relief of the Demon Lord, which apparently has the power to charm any monster that looks at it. Cedric watches a giant boar pull a heavy supply cart, still skeptical about whether a single stone can really keep people safe from being eaten. But Alma explains that since these are just low-level monsters, they don't have the strength to fight the stone's magic, unlike the Fenrir-class beast. To prove his point, Alma shows off a boar jumping through a flaming hoop like a circus act, telling Cedric they can do pretty much whatever he wants. Cedric looks like he's seen a ghost, telling Alma it should be impossible for him to have that stone since it's a legendary artifact of the demon race. Edward is visibly sweating and looking stressed out. He thinks to himself how the demon race would never let a legendary item like that go because of their pride, making him spiral even more as he wonders why someone in a middle-of-nowhere place like this would have it. He can't wrap his head around how a young kid like Alma managed to get it, so Alma tries to smooth things over with a casual smile, telling them he gets why they're surprised, but they can relax because the monsters follow every order they're given. Suddenly, Cedric starts sobbing into a handkerchief and says the whole thing is just amazing, which leaves Alma standing there completely confused by the guy's reaction. Cedric goes on to say he never imagined anyone could actually turn monsters into a workforce like this. He thinks it's the perfect fix for a tiny territory that's running low on people. And as Cedric continues to cry and dab his eyes, Alma can only watch and wonder if all appraisers are this sensitive about their work. Moving on, Cedric turns to his companion and asks Edward if he doesn't agree with how impressive the whole situation is, leading Edward to admit that the Flanders territory has gone through a massive transformation. He notes that just a few days ago it was a boring, plain area, but now it's something else entirely. While Alma looks up at him, Edward mumbles under his breath that he needs to get a report out about this as soon as possible. Later on, Luna looks pretty down, mentioning that people are starting to question if her father is even fit to be a lord anymore. Someone quickly tells her that's not the case at all. Cedric gives a confident smile and tells them that since he's a court appraiser, he's going to recommend the council uses this village as a model to show everyone else how it's done, which means if everything goes according to plan, the kingdom might actually step up with some serious support. Luna and Eric can hardly believe what they're hearing as Raoul starts cheering and tells Alma he actually pulled it off. Alma is pretty flustered by all the praise, especially when Raoul brings up how much Eric helped too. Meanwhile, Eric just stands there in total disbelief at how much things have changed for the better. It's almost too much for him to process, and he starts breaking down in tears, saying he'd completely given up on having a future with everyone until just a few days ago. He's clearly overwhelmed, so Raoul gives Alma a huge smile and makes sure to thank him for everything he's done for the territory. Alma just watches him, feeling a bit awkward about the attention while Luna watches them from the side. She thinks to herself that Alma is honestly amazing because she never thought they could actually turn the whole situation around in just 3 days. But Sanya chimes in and says that Alma is just different. Luna looks over at her, a bit caught off guard by the comment, so Sanya explains further with a gentle look on her face, saying that Alma isn't like any of the people who have come here before him. Luna looks down and blushes, quietly agreeing with her sister as the weight of everything Alma has done finally starts to sink in. Alma stands outside looking up at the sky, wondering what this weird feeling is. Everything was supposed to go well, but he can't help feeling like something's off. It's this nagging sense of discomfort that he can't explain, and it's making his chest feel restless as he wonders if he messed something up. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, someone mentions how amazing the Flanders territory turned out to be, so Cedric chimes in, saying he never expected the place to be so developed before they even got there. Edward keeps a serious face and agrees that it's the truth, and then a whole week passes by after Edward and Cedric make their way back home. The territory has totally transformed because the monsters have been helping out with all the construction and road work. One of the local villagers spots a wolf monster running over and greets it like an old friend. The lady asks if it's finished working and offers it some food, showing how the residents who used to be terrified have finally gotten used to having them around. Alma shows off his item box magic in the middle of the fields, making a black cube float right in front of a local farmer who looks totally stunned by what he's seeing. The farmer can't believe his eyes and asks if Alma can just keep making that stuff endlessly, but Alma lets out a sigh and says no, explaining that the space inside depends on how much magic power someone has, so it changes based on that. Watching all this, Luna's sister looks pretty annoyed and mutters about how it's just not fair. She starts complaining about how she always had to carry heavy water around until her whole body was sore. And it really bugs her that Alma is just casually using high-level magic she can't even use herself. Luna doesn't go easy on her though, telling her sister it's not Alma's fault and that she's just physically weak because she's always hiding in her room. Luna keeps going, pointing out that her sister grew up without any skills other than magic and is even terrible with directions, though her sister tries to defend herself by saying she studied magic a ton. Eric sees things getting a bit tense and awkwardly suggests they should probably just leave it at that. So Alma just stands there thinking as Eric admits that, regardless of the effort, having magic like that really does feel like a cheat code. Alma turns to Luna and asks if she wants to try learning the magic for herself, which completely catches her sister off guard as she repeats the words item box out loud, looking like she's finally found a goal to work toward. The two of them head inside to Luna's room, which is basically just a massive private library filled to the brim with books. Alma looks around the place a bit surprised, commenting on how this is actually her room, and he notices that there are high-level grimoires scattered all over the floor like they're nothing. Luna's sister starts to get a bit fidgety and tries to explain the situation while Alma just watches her. She gets into the technical side of things, explaining that the item box skill actually has two strict requirements, the first being a magic power stat of at least 1,000. Then she holds up 2 fingers and adds that the second requirement is the ability to use spatial teleportation magic. But since she thinks her own power is only at 600, she realizes she's still short by 400 points. Suddenly she decides she's going to go hunt monsters in the forest to level up, forcing Alma to grab her and tell her to slow down. Alma looks up with a grin and says since they're already here, they might as well use a secret weapon, leading to Luna's sister looking back at him totally confused as she asks what he means by a secret weapon. He pulls out a glowing fruit, and she recognizes it immediately, asking if that's really a golden apple. A quick breakdown shows it's a rare fruit from a sacred tree that boosts mana. Alma tells her eating it adds 500 to her total. She stares at the glowing thing like she's not sure about it, asking him if she really has to eat it, so Alma asks if golden food just doesn't look good to her, offering to find another way if it feels too weird. She just smiles and says she isn't about to start doubting him now, taking the fruit into her hands and taking a big bite. She looks completely shocked and blurs out that it's actually delicious. She starts going on about how it's perfectly sweet and refreshing, with the sourness balancing everything out just right. Alma admits he's had one before and it was great. Even though the boost caps out at 2,500, he still finds himself wanting more. Sanya feels a warm sensation spreading through her whole body, like energy is just surging inside, and she realizes her magic power is actually increasing right then and there. So she looks at Alma with this intense look and asks him if she can have just one more, but Alma tells her she can have one more later, keeping her focused on the task since Sanya says the only thing they're missing now is a teleport spell like the one Alma used before. She's seen it in grimoires under the name Instant Movement Magic. Though those books always say spatial magic is incredibly rare and hard to pull off. Alma thinks about how the quality of those magic books can really vary depending on which one you find. And it turns out that just finding a book with the right info is half the battle when trying to learn it, which is why the first step to mastering spatial magic is having a perfect understanding of the space all around you. Alma goes over the basics, thinking about how teleportation works by swapping the magical essence of a destination with where you're standing, which is why Sanya mentions that using a familiar spot makes the whole thing a lot easier, and Alma totally agrees with her. Sanya explains that the trick is making the distance between those 2.0 for just a split second during the swap. Even though it's pretty complicated to actually do, you have to perfectly picture yourself landing at those coordinates to really master the spell. She admits the whole concept is a lot to take in, but she's still down to give it her best shot, so Alma cheers her on. Since she's still learning, Sanya asks Alma if he can show her an example of how it's supposed to look, and Alma decides they should start small, picking out a short distance across the room as their target for the first try. They keep at it for a while, with Sanya pushing him to keep going and try the move again and again, until Luna suddenly bursts in to let them know the tea is finally ready and they should probably take a break. But while Sanya is just sitting there looking completely wiped out, Alma is already popping back and forth across the room like it's nothing. Sanya stands there looking pretty lost. While Alma tries to figure out how to even explain the crazy situation he's in, he figures it is what it is, and they both just sit back for a second with some hot tea. Sanya looks totally drained from the practice, so Alma tells her there's no reason to rush if she doesn't get it right on the first try, because even though Luna has a natural feel for magic, it's still better to take things slow when you're learning how to move energy around. He remembers his own training back in his previous life. It actually took him a whole month just to get the hang of it, so he tells her to just take it easy, and she looks down and says she gets what he's saying. But Sanya isn't about to quit, and she suddenly puts everything she's got into one more try while Alma watches from the side. She ends up tumbling over, but she looks up in total shock, asking if she actually just managed to pull the move off. Alma's eye goes wide. Even though he was the one who showed her how to do it as an example, he can't believe she actually learned how to teleport that fast. Sanya stands there catching her breath, but there's a serious magic sense coming off her as she taps into that sage gift of hers. Alma knew Luna was going to be a natural at this, but Sanya looks up and asks if she just pulled off the item box move. Alma smiles and tells her she'll be a pro with it soon if she keeps practicing, so she takes a sip of her tea and just nods, looking pretty satisfied with how things are going. Looking at her, Alma realizes she actually just loves magic for the sake of it. He starts thinking about how Luna is such a fast learner for her age and probably the best student he's ever had, but Sanya tells him she really doesn't want to hear that from a genius like him. She starts explaining that she was actually deep into studying magic long before she ever even got her official gift, and it turns out her great-grandfather was a legendary mage in the kingdom, so their house was always packed with magic books. She's basically been obsessed with learning new spells since she was a little kid, and Alma can see that her passion for it hasn't faded one bit as they finish up their break. Eric starts telling Alma about their history, mentions how their family used to live in the royal capital back in the day, but it turns out his father got completely fed up with all the constant drama and fighting between the nobles. To keep everyone safe, they moved out to this territory where their ancestors were from, and it's pretty clear those noble disputes were a total nightmare to deal with. Alma looks on, realizing that Luna and her family have actually been through a lot of struggle to get where they are now, but Eric says the people living here were amazing. They welcomed them with open arms from the very start. He explains how they'd sit and listen to his father's story, and the locals even teamed up to build them a proper house because they felt a lord shouldn't be living in a dump. Sanya looks up with a serious face, says that's the whole reason she's so determined to return the favor to everyone in the territory. Alma just watches her as she stops for a second, then she gives him a really warm smile and thanks him directly for all the help he's been giving them lately. She knows that with the item box magic he's teaching her, they'll be able to do so much more for the people than they ever could before. Alma thinks about how Luna always calls him unfair, but seeing Sanya's warm smile makes him feel like she's the one being unfair. He looks around at the village and thinks that once he finishes teaching Luna the right magic, the territory will be in a great spot, convinced she'll be able to handle just about anything that comes her way without needing him to step in. It's a bit of a lonely thought, but he wonders if the land might actually be better off if he wasn't there, right when a sharp noise catches his ear. Sanya asks what's up, and Alma tells her things are getting way too noisy outside all of a sudden, so he asks what's going on just as Luna rushes over, looking completely terrified and trying to explain the situation. Someone outside starts yelling for Eric, the Lord of Flanders, telling him he needs to come with them quietly. Eric is standing there in total shock, asking why on earth this is even happening while a group of knights closes in on him. The knight accuses him of using monsters for his own gain, leaving Alma and the rest of the family frozen as the soldiers charge Eric with treason against the kingdom and order him to face trial in the royal capital immediately. It's already been 3 days since the knights hauled Eric away to the capital, leaving everyone in a state of waiting and wondering, so Alma keeps himself busy feeding the village animals to keep his mind off things. Luna tries to stay positive, telling herself and the others that everything is going to be okay despite the heavy vibe hanging over the village. She calls out to Alma to get his attention, and he reminds her that her dad said he was just going there to explain the situation. He tells her that if he's innocent, he just needs to stay calm and stand his ground, and she agrees that's the only way, clenching her face and promising that they're going to protect the territory themselves until her father gets back. Later on, Alma and Luna are hanging out with Raoul when Raoul notices someone and mentions he's finally back on his feet. Luna yells out his name, but Alma is focused on the man's arm, Asking what happened to cause such a bad wound, a villager stands there looking totally drained with his arm wrapped up in thick bandages. The other neighbors gather around and ask what happened to him, sensing that things are about to get even worse. The injured guy is shaking as he tells them they got jumped by the kingdom's army out in the forest, and he's convinced those soldiers are planning to take over the whole territory while Eric is away. Raoul tries to play it down, telling Alma he's probably just overthinking things. But Alma isn't so sure. He can't stop thinking about why the army would be involved right now. He looks closer at the man's arm and notices the wound looks more like a claw rip than a sword cut, plus there's some weird powder all over his clothes. The guy starts begging for help, crying out that his wife and kid are still trapped out in those woods. Alma doesn't hesitate for a second, telling the man he's on it. He tells everyone they're going into the forest to check things out and asks Sanya to keep an eye on the man while they're gone. And as they head in, Alma realizes the army was likely just an illusion. Raoul is confused, but Alma explains it's a monster that uses toxic powder to make people hallucinate whatever they're most afraid of. Alma realizes the people living here are probably losing it because they're seeing fake versions of the kingdom's army, and he can't help but wonder why anyone would ever bring their family into a place this dangerous. Raoul suddenly calls out as they find two people completely wrapped up in thick white webbing, hanging there like they've been caught by a predator. Alma points out they're totally out of commission while the group tries to figure out their next move. Right then, a whole group of armored soldiers with glowing eyes shows up out of nowhere. Surrounding them, Raoul starts to panic, asking Alma if he's absolutely sure these guys aren't real. He's shaking and can barely even talk because he's so freaked out, especially when a massive Fenrir wolf appears right in front of them. Raoul gasps out her name, but Alma stays chill, telling him it's just another fake image based on what they're afraid of. Raoul tries to clarify if the wolf and the soldiers are all just fake, but Alma shuts that down real quick and says no, because turns out the real monsters are actually hiding inside the illusions, striking while their targets are distracted by the fakes. Raoul starts to get pretty nervous and asks if they really have to fight that whole army. Alma just stays cool and tells him it looks like it, because standing right there is a guy with a serious face and a high-collared coat, looking like a total pro. Alma realizes the forest is bringing up people's fears, and he admits this guy is the last person he ever wanted to see. Suddenly, Raoul draws his sword and shouts that something is coming their way. The giant Fenrir wolf leaps through the air with its claws out, while Raoul braces himself for a direct hit. Alma just stands there watching the wolf charge in, not even flinching at the massive beast because he knows that no matter how good these illusions look, they can't actually use the real person's ability. He pulls out a glowing orb of magic, figuring that even if a monster can hide what it really looks like, his search magic can still sniff them out. He activates his search sense, casting a huge grid over the trees, and just like that he finds it. The real monster is hiding right there on a tree trunk. Alma doesn't waste any time and fires off a massive blast of advanced wind magic to clear the area. And as the dust starts to settle, Raoul notices the illusion is finally breaking apart. But Alma suddenly spots something and yells at Raoul to look up, because a dark shadow is dropping straight out of the trees right on top of them, and it turns out to be a giant, creepy moth monster that lets out a loud roar as it attacks. So Raoul screams out for Luna, but Alma is already on it, summoning jagged earth pillars to block the hit. Luna just stands there staring at him. She can't believe he's just casually using high-level magic like it's a total joke. Raoul thinks the whole fight is over and says that should settle things, but Alma tells him he's wrong. He turns toward a scared man holding his family and asks if the three of them were trying to skip town, and the man just looks back at him totally confused, asking what Alma even means by that. Alma starts putting the pieces together. The fact that these people chose the dangerous forest over the main road, and considering they were seeing illusions of the kingdom's army, he realizes they must be running from something. Then the man mentions a rumor that a guy named Great Sage Julius was the one who framed Eric, which just makes Alma ask who that actually is. Turns out Julius is the strongest wizard in Familia and basically runs the entire country, a cold, merciless prime minister who destroys anyone that gets in his way. He even executed a lord recently just on a hunch and took over his land in days. Sanya looks up at her sister with a worried face. The vibe is getting pretty heavy as the man keeps explaining that since Alma is an outsider, he doesn't know how scary Julius is, and they never know when the army might show up. So the man admits he always thought it was a bad idea to use monsters for labor like they do in this territory. Suddenly, someone yells out that he's being incredibly selfish. Alma looks back to see who's shouting, and it's Luna looking totally fed up. She calls him out for saying that after everyone just barely made it out alive together. Luna gets right in the man's face and asks if he's really planning to dump all the hard work on Alma. Alma just watches her go off, and she keeps yelling, asking if he forgot what her dad always says about how believing in people means actually taking responsibility. Alma turns to Sanya with a smile and tells her thanks, but he's doing just fine, though he doesn't stop there, because he looks over at the group and says it's alright since he knows everyone is just really scared right now. And then he admits that the mess is actually on him for doing things half-heartedly, but he's ready to make it right. Alma looks down with a serious face and says he's going to prove himself to everyone, and putting a hand over his heart, he swears that if the kingdom's army ever shows up, he won't let them lay a single finger on anyone. Eric looks at the kid like he's crazy and asks what he's even planning to do after saying something that big. Then he follows up by asking if Alma really thinks he can just take on an entire army all by himself. Alma just looks up at the trees and says he needs to at least pull together enough military strength so everyone can finally stop worrying. Alma looks pretty confident as he tells the group not to worry because he's already got a plan, and he starts heading out, waving while telling them he'll be gone for a bit and to keep an eye on things, even as someone tries to call him back. Meanwhile, some high-ranking officials are looking at legendary items like the fertilizer of the harvest god and magic crystals, noting that no normal lord should ever have stuff this rare. Edward points out that there's a kid involved who seems linked to the Empire, and they've even found a relic that belongs to the demon race. He figures it's pretty obvious that the Flanders territory has either teamed up with the Empire or made some kind of shady deal with a powerful demon, but Julius tells him to slow down and not jump to conclusions yet, and Edward just agrees. Julius taps his hand on the desk and asks how Lord Eric is doing lately, which leads to a report that Eric is just sitting quietly in a jail cell claiming he's innocent, while someone just hums at the news. Julius stares off, whispering Eric's name to himself like he's calculating his next move. He tells them to make sure they treat Eric with respect, because the man might actually be perfect to use as bait. The full moon hangs over the building while someone sighs, thinking about how they're just being used like a pawn and back inside. Luna is tucked in and looks like she's out cold next to her teddy bear. But it turns out it was just a cover, because she's actually outside near the trees looking pretty determined as she sneaks through the woods under the moonlight, trying her best to stay quiet and not get noticed. Suddenly, she runs into Raoul and Sanya waiting for her, and Raoul asks what she's even doing out so late, making Luna totally freeze up. She can't believe she just got caught by Sanya and Raoul at the same time, and she's standing there trying to figure out how they knew since she was just in bed a minute ago. Sanya doesn't hold back and calls her out, saying she knew Luna was just pretending to be asleep. And then she tells her sister she's been acting really weird ever since she heard the name Julius, like she's got too much on her mind. Sanya asks if she was really going to try and take down Julius all by herself, noting that Luna has always been way too reckless, leaving Luna standing there in total silence. Luna suddenly bolts into the woods, leaving Sanya standing there completely caught off guard, and Sanya yells out, asking why she's even running away, while Raoul just watches the whole thing go down. She keeps calling out for her sister to stop, but Luna is already heading deep into the trees, and Sanya looks totally stressed out, screaming for her sister again as she tries to keep up with her. It doesn't last long though, because Luna ends up face down on the ground, leading Raoul to joke about how she has absolutely no stamina. Luna catches her breath and tells them that she actually only met the guy one time, and she starts thinking back to the gift-receiving ceremony at the big temple, remembering how everything changed when the sage title was announced in front of the huge crowd. And then this tall, creepy guy in a mask showed up right in front of her. He looked her right in the eyes and told her his name was Julia. Luna stands there looking totally confused, especially when a voice calls out, calling her a great sage. Julius leans in close, telling her it's pretty obvious she's got some serious talent. He looks her right in the eyes, telling her to come work for him, promising to give her anything she wants. Luna looks at his hand, reaching out, realizing that heading to the kingdom is the only way her dad gets saved. She knows her dad wouldn't actually be happy being freed like this, but he'd be safe, and that's all that matters. With a look of total focus, she tells everyone to just stay out of her way. Suddenly, she fires off a lightning ball right at the ground, creating a massive explosion of light that blinds everyone. Sanya struggles to see through the flash, screaming out for Raoul as the dust kicks up everywhere. Raoul just smirks through the smoke, mentioning how he can track anyone just by their footsteps, even if he can't see a thing. Luna is completely caught off guard, as Raoul warns her not to underestimate how fast the Night of Gale can move. Luna looks down with a shadow over her eyes, quietly apologizing to Drutsksan and promising to help out once she's back, while the roof of the building suddenly caves in, completely catching Raoul off guard as Luna just keeps walking away from the mess. She starts sprinting as fast as she can, leaving Sanya wondering if she actually planned for that loose roof to fall at that exact moment. Raoul realizes she's using the town's layout to her advantage, but he's a bit busy since someone is stuck under the pile of wood yelling for help. Luna is totally out of breath, but she knows she's almost home free if she can just make it past the territory line. Only a massive spell called Seed of the Sky Tree goes off, and giant wooden pillars burst from the ground to block her path entirely. Someone yells out that they finally have her cornered, and Luna stops in her tracks as she sees Sanya standing right there. Sanya looks pretty upset with the whole situation, telling her sister to just be a good girl and stay put for once. She tries to calm things down, suggesting that the best thing they can do is just wait for Alma to show up together. Sanya looks away while telling her to just talk to him, leaving Luna standing there feeling completely lost about what to do next. Luna gives a soft smile while looking back, quietly thanking Alma for everything he's done so far. But the moment is cut short as she asks for help with the territory, and a strange light starts glowing from her body. Raoul is completely shocked to see her actually teleporting, even if Alma mentioned she can only move a few inches at a time. He just stares at her with a nervous look, thinking she's a total genius for pulling off a move like that right now. Things get tricky as Raoul looks around the woods. It's pitch black, and he has no idea how they're supposed to search the forest. Sanya stands there looking pretty annoyed, telling Raoul that her sister is always acting like this, and explains that once she gets an idea in her head, she just rushes off without listening to anyone, which usually leads to her getting lost. She seems frustrated because her sister insisted that Alma was someone they could actually trust, and suddenly, she just loses it, screaming at the top of her lungs that her sister is a complete idiot. She yells that she doesn't even care if her sister gets lost again, leaving Raoul standing there just thinking about how crazy loud her voice is. One of the officials finishes up the conversation, saying he'll get everything sorted out, making sure all the arrangements are in place. He looks down at a small object in his hand and asks what that kid's name was again, as the scarred man next to him takes a second to think. He describes him as the boy who gave advice to the local lord and even handed over some rare items, and finally settles on the name Alma Fellows. Meanwhile, out in the woods, Alma is standing tall, clearly focused on finding someone. He calls out to the empty air, saying the other person is still great at hiding their presence, admitting it took him until sunset just to track them down. The massive wolf Fenrir suddenly shows himself, mentioning how weird it is for the kid to be the one hunting him down for a change. Alma doesn't miss a beat, telling the giant wolf that he actually came out here because he needs to ask for a big favor. He stands his ground right in front of the beast's snout and calls out the name Fenrir, getting his full attention. With a completely serious look on his face, Alma tells the Lord of the Forest that he wants to fight him. Fenrir sounds pretty surprised by the request, asking if he's actually serious about a fight, but Alma just gives him a firm yes. Alma stands his ground and tells the giant wolf they should fight, and he really means they should go all out, even suggesting that they both put their lives on the line for this battle. Fenrir just looks at him and says there's absolutely no reason for them to do something like that. He admits he owes the kid a favor, but thinks dying in a fight is way too much. And besides, he's been busy trying to find his son since this morning, so he tries to turn Alma down by saying they can talk later. Alma gets a serious look and says he doesn't have the luxury of playing it safe. He suddenly lets loose a massive attack that blasts a huge hole right into the side of the mountain. He keeps moving fast while the rocks around them just start falling apart. Fenrir asks what's going on, saying Alma isn't the type to do something this dumb without a reason and demands to know what's up. Alma asks if he's heard the rumors about Eric being caught by the kingdom, since the wolf lives so close to where the people are. Fenrir thinks back to the rumors about how the Lord supposedly worked with monsters to plan a rebellion, and Alma looking down admitting that he actually feels a bit responsible for everything that happened. So Fenrir explains that he's the one stuck with the job of proving Eric never wanted to rebel. He's been thinking of ways to do it, and Alma suggests that maybe giving the kingdom a rare young monster might prove the Lord's loyalty. Fenrir catches on and asks if he's talking about his son, but Alma just calls it small talk, while asking if that's finally a good enough reason for them to start their fight. Fenrir suddenly says he's just gotten too old, which catches Alma completely off guard. The giant wolf bares his teeth and snaps that he's getting way too old to just sit back and overlook how dark Alma's heart has become. Everything changes instantly as Fenrir finally stops holding back, letting out a massive burst of energy. Alma's eyes go wide as he realizes Fenrir just vanished into thin air, only to have the massive wolf show up right behind him. Fenrir is actually stunned because he was sure he caught the kid by surprise, but Alma is standing there perfectly fine. It's like the attack didn't even touch him. The kid doesn't waste any time and starts calling out some advanced wind magic, looking to level the whole area with a massive move he calls High Storm. As the wind dies down, Alma just nods to himself and says he finally gets it. He looks over at Fenrir and asks if that was the shadow escape move he just saw, while he pieces together how the wolf is jumping from one shadow to the next to dodge. Alma scratches his chin, admitting he honestly thought he had him with that last hit, but Fenrir is the one truly impressed, thinking about how this kid's magical power is just on a whole different level. Fenrir realizes he's not going to win a straight-up magic fight against Alma, so he decides to switch things up, telling the kid that no matter how much power he has, he's still just a wizard. The giant wolf calls out a move called Shadow Eater, and suddenly these dark beast-like shapes start crawling right out of the shadows. Alma watches them appear, realizing that the shadows themselves are turning into weapons as multiple claws slash at him from every direction. Alma keeps his guard up, thinking about how annoying it is that these attacks show up with zero warning. He knows if he gets too distracted by the shadow beast, the real Fenrir is going to jump in for a finishing blow when he least expects it. Fenrir actually praises him, saying the kid is way more cautious than he originally thought, but Alma just plays it cool. He notices the main body is staying back on purpose, and he can tell the wolf is definitely. Alma explains that his reaction magic barrier is a custom trick he built by mixing detection and defense magic together. The way it works is pretty simple. It senses an attack coming to calculate the damage, and then automatically makes a barrier strong enough to stop it. While this is active, he doesn't have to worry about getting caught off guard by any surprise hits, but the spell is so complex that it burns through a massive amount of his energy. He's moving fast through the shadows, knowing that there's no way he can keep this barrier up forever. The shadow wolves keep lunging, and it's getting obvious that Fenrir is actually better than him in almost every combat stat. She just hasn't been playing aggressive yet, and if she keeps using her speed and numbers to control the fight, she can just buy time until he's totally out of juice. Fenrir is staring him down, making Alma realize she could just overwhelm him with tactics and end it right here. He knows he has to switch it up, so he starts casting physical enhancement magic, instantly boosting his physical strength and his stamina to keep himself in the game. He isn't done yet, though. He follows that up by cranking his agility and reaction speed as high as they can go. Alma keeps the momentum going, instantly triggering an evasion boost to help him move faster, but he doesn't stop there, quickly stacking up his defense and his durability to make himself even tougher. On top of that, he kicks in enhanced vision and presence detection. Fenrir watches him, shocked that he can chant all these spells at once, noticing that he's layering every single enhancement he has just to close the gap between them. One of the shadow wolves lunges forward with its jaws wide open, but Alma is ready for it. The pack swarms him from every side, yet he stays calm in the middle of the chaos. He blurs through the air, dodging claws by inches as his new speed makes him almost impossible to hit. Turning the defense into a counter, he swings a heavy kick that connects solid, and then he puts his whole weight into a follow-up punch to keep the pressure on. Fenrir stares him down, looking pretty impressed, and says she thinks it's finally time to get serious. Alma stands his ground, looking out at the massive wolf perched on the rocks across from him. He gives her a little smirk and tells her to quit holding back and show him her real strength already. Alma keeps pushing, asking if this is really all she's got, which just makes Fenrir call him a total monster. Fenrir admits to herself she didn't think he could actually handle her shadow army head-on like that, but she looks up at the sky, noticing that the timing for what's coming next is actually perfect. Everything starts to shake with a loud noise, leaving Alma standing there wondering what the hell is happening. He looks toward the horizon and realizes the sun is finally starting to peek over the edge, and then Fenrir just grins, telling him that everything is about to change from here on out. The whole area gets covered in this crazy dark energy as she announces that he's stepped into her domain. Everything takes on this ancient, legendary vibe, like they've stepped right into the old stories of Fenrir herself. Old legends say that when the world finally ends, Fenrir is the one who's going to swallow the sun and the moon whole, and Alma starts to realize exactly what that means for him right now. In other words, darkness is basically her home turf, and he's standing right in the middle of it while Fenrir looks down from the top of the cliffs, just waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, these crazy energy strikes start slamming into Alma's magic shields from every single direction, and he looks completely caught off guard, like he didn't see any of this coming. The weirdest part is that there wasn't even a tiny hint or a sign that an attack was about to happen. She actually just moved through the shadows to strike him in a literal heartbeat. It's a guaranteed hit that nobody can dodge, and it turns out this is actually Fenrir's special environmental skill. And as she howls, the shadow that shrouds the apocalypse completely takes over. Fenrir keeps the pressure on, telling Alma it's totally useless to even try running away, and Alma realizes he can't just play defense. So he starts prepping his light magic to blast the whole area with a massive flash, yelling for the light to spread out and shine, but Fenrir doesn't even flinch, just repeating that none of this is going to work on her. Suddenly, Alma gets caught by a heavy hit that knocks him right off his feet, and the impact is so strong it sends him flying back. He's clearly struggling to keep up with how fast she's moving, so he switches things up and goes for some advanced earth magic. He triggers a move called Volcano Rock, causing giant pillars of stone to burst from the ground, and as the dust settles, he realizes the light wasn't meant to clear the shadows. It was just a way to figure out where she's attacking from next, so he holds his ground inside a glowing shield while the entire forest floor just gets completely wrecked. Alma grits his teeth as the pressure of the fight starts weighing on him. He's barely hanging on while Fenrir tells him all his effort was for nothing. Shadows start creeping up around the area, and she explains that she can move through the dark the very second he tries to start an attack, making it impossible for him to land a hit. She notices his defense is slipping and asks if he's losing his ability to block her, so Alma decides to switch things up. He pulls together some wind magic and triggers a move called Air Jump, launching himself high into the sky to get away from the shadows on the ground, but Fenrir just watches him from the dark and calls him foolish for even trying that. She asks if he seriously thought shadows wouldn't be able to reach him up in the air too, since the entire darkness is basically her territory. She tells him there's no escape at all and warns him that she won't give him an easy death. She's going to tear him apart limb by limb until he tells her where her son is. Alma smirks and tells Fenrir that she finally showed a weakness, and he adds that for someone as thoughtful as she is, there's a reason she stayed quiet. Alma points out that she never would have chased him this far if she wasn't totally sure she'd win, but suddenly a massive light hits the area. Fenrir is completely caught off guard by the brightness. Alma just looks up calmly and says he's got his own reasons for wanting to end this quickly. Fenrir thinks the whole thing is crazy since the sun should have set behind the peaks long ago. She spots something moving way up on the mountain top and starts questioning what she's seeing. The light gets brighter, showing the true scale of the massive cliffs surrounding them as a giant eye opens in the rock. It turns out this is Gaku, a mountain mimic that hides in the terrain to hunt. Fenrir is losing it, realizing the mountain is actually a giant beast and wondering if Alma planned this from the start. Fenrir finally figures out that Alma was just acting the whole time to lure her into this open spot. She tries to scramble away before things get worse, but she notices the shadows moving and Alma reaches out, telling her that the shadows are already closing in from the sky, so there's absolutely no way out. He drops his sealing magic on her, and these massive heavy chains come crashing down out of nowhere. The chains of stillness wrap tightly around her body, and the metal links even loop around her snout to keep her completely pinned to the dirt. Fenrir just lies there totally defeated, realizing she's completely lost this fight to a little kid. She tells Alma that she knows losers don't really get to ask for favors, but she begs him that if he has to take someone, he should take her and leave her son out of it. A voice says that Alma is seriously impressive for taking down the guardian of the mountain. It's the Fenrir pup, and he's cheering because he knew Alma was a total monster all along. Fenrir is caught off guard by what Alma just said and asks him what he actually means by that. Alma just turns around to look at the forest, where a huge group of animals and monsters has gathered in the clearing. It turns out all these different creatures were hiding nearby the whole time, and they were actually watching the entire fight because they represent all the monsters living in this mountain range. Alma tells Fenrir that since she admitted she lost, the title of Guardian has officially passed to him, which totally shocks her. She wonders if that was his plan from the start, but he just says he knew she was the boss because her son told him, so the little pup just hangs his tongue out and cheers about how awesome the fight was. Fenrir doesn't get why he went through all the trouble, telling him she owed him one and would have helped if he just asked. Alma explains that it would have taken way too long to make the rest of the forest monsters obey him any other way, so he had to make sure every single one of them saw him win to be recognized as the new boss of the area. Alma keeps explaining his plan, saying that taking down the former guardian at her full strength was the fastest way to get results, since handing over a rare monster's kid to the kingdom would prove his loyalty, making Fenrir realize he was just baiting her into a fight. She watches him closely, thinking to herself that she really can't figure this kid out at all. Suddenly, Alma drops down to the ground and gets into a deep bow right in front of her. He looks down at the dirt with a really serious face and tells Fenrir he's truly sorry for everything, admitting he totally betrayed her trust just to get the power to protect his own land, even though he knew it meant hurting her. He tells her he isn't even going to ask for forgiveness yet, but he promises he'll find a way to pay her back for it one day. Alma just looks up and asks her to please try and keep her cool for now, which leaves Fenrir just staring at him, thinking about how weird this kid actually is. She stands there over him, finally asking what he thinks he's doing by acting like this after everything that happened. Alma's caught off guard and asks what she's getting at, but Fenrir just explains that people with real power don't usually bow their heads so easily. She tells him that since he already went through all that effort to show off his strength, it wouldn't make sense for him to back down now. Looking at him with a satisfied expression, she says she was right about him after all. Then she drops a bombshell, telling Alma that from this day forward, he's officially the new guardian of the mountain. Alma thanks her, feeling relieved that things are finally moving along so they can start making the right preparations for what's coming next. The sun shines over the cliffs as Fenrir speaks up again, telling him she actually has one favor to ask. Alma looks back up at the massive wolf, sounding a bit curious about what kind of request she could possibly have for him, and she just stands there tall, asking him to give her a proper name. The kid is totally stunned, just repeating the word back to her like he can't believe what he's hearing. Fenrir stands there with her little pup and clarifies that she wants him to pick out a special name for both of them, which really. Fenrir keeps going, explaining that she wants some kind of proof that she's really his servant, just standing there telling him that's her one wish. Alma eventually gives in and says he'll do it, but he warns her that he's actually pretty bad at picking out names. It's been 2 full days since Luna left the Flander territory, and everything seems quiet for now as Alma still hasn't made it back from the forest. Raoul is just hanging around the gate, waiting and keeping an eye out, but there's still no sign of an army or anyone else approaching the area yet. Raoul lets out a heavy sigh while Sanya sits right next to him, looking completely drained and over the whole waiting game. The vibe is getting pretty awkward for Raoul, and he's basically just wishing Alma would show up already so things can get back to normal when a voice finally calls out from nearby, apologizing for being so late getting back. Raoul and Sanya both freak out because there's Alma, just dangling helplessly from the giant wolf's mouth while she stands there like it's nothing. Raoul starts yelling, asking what the hell happened and if the wolf finally just wrecked him, while Sanya just stares at Fenrir in total shock. Alma looks pretty rough while dangling there, but he tells Raoul that he's got it all wrong and just needs to look, because Raoul and Sanya finally notice the rest of the pack hiding in the trees. Raoul can barely get his words out, just staring at the monsters, while Fenrir explains that these creatures actually gathered an army to take out their own mother and rule the forest. Raoul starts panicking even more, shouting at the kid and asking if he actually managed to take down the legendary Fenrir all by himself. But Alma, still hanging upside down, just says that's not exactly what happened. Raoul admits the kid is on a whole different level, though he stops for a second, suddenly realizing that he can actually understand everything Fenrir and the other monsters are saying. Alma explains that since he gave the wolf a special title, their telepathic link has grown way stronger than before, which is a big deal because monsters in this world almost never show up with a title naturally. It's a total rarity, and whenever it does happen, those monsters end up being way tougher and more intelligent than any others of their kind. However, it turns out that by using naming magic and feeding a monster enough power, a person can actually give out a title whenever they want. Raoul looks over at the horned beast now known as Boa the Wise Monster and realizes that both it and the wolf look completely different, and it's a huge deal because Boa alone is now strong enough to take on a B-rank adventurer, which leaves everyone in total shock. Alma looks pretty wiped out, admitting that handing out special titles to every single monster in the forest was way harder than he thought it would be. Raoul is stunned that Alma actually went through with it, thinking that even a kid with that much mana would eventually run dry. But Alma just looks up and casually confirms that he did it for all 30,000 monsters living in the area. He explains that now there's an entire army of monsters, from the small ones to the massive ones, all ready to protect the land. On top of that, having these titles means their status can be checked from anywhere, making it easy to spot trouble from a distance. Though Alma is still a bit worried that the locals might be terrified of having to rely on monsters for safety after everything that happened. Raoul tells him not to sweat it because at this point, that's honestly the least of their problem, especially when the local farmers and villagers are already standing by, looking pretty rough and exhausted from the constant struggle. Raoul stands there with his gear while Alma thinks back on everything Sanya and Eric told him lately. He's really starting to get what taking responsibility is all about. The local guys aren't backing down either, and one of them steps up to say they're going to fight right alongside them. They're all in, promising to hold down the fort against the kingdom's army until Eric makes it back to the territory. Raoul just laughs it off and says this is all because of how hard Sanya's been working, which catches her completely off guard. Fenrir takes a look around the area and mentions that this place is actually a pretty solid domain, and Alma couldn't agree more. But as soon as the villagers realize the legendary Fenrir is standing right there, they completely lose it. They're all standing there like they've seen a ghost, trying to process how a massive monster is just hanging out with them. Fenrir just brushes it off to get back to business, and just then Alma looks over with a serious face. He mentions that since he's heading off to the capital soon, he needs Fernet to step up and keep an eye on the whole domain while he's away. Fenrir gives a quick nod and says he understands the orders perfectly. The big guy is officially known as Fernet, the great wolf of the Fenrir race. The little pup isn't about to be left out though, waving a paw and saying he gets it too. Alma takes a second to breathe, thinking about how long it's been since he totally ran out of mana. He's sitting there completely drained, which makes him realize he hasn't even checked his stats yet. Looking at the screen, everything looks familiar from his past life. He actually knows these numbers by heart. But as he looks closer, he sees something that doesn't make any sense at all. Even though all his crazy high stats carried over, his actual level is stuck at 1. He starts wondering if levels are just a way to track how much someone's abilities have grown, because reincarnated people usually keep all the skills and knowledge they had when they were adults. Alma starts thinking that maybe his level and growth progression didn't carry over with his other abilities. He looks down at his hand, trying to make sense of his weird situation, but honestly, he figures he's plenty strong for now and doesn't really need to get any more powerful. Still, the thought sticks with him. He can't help but wonder if there's still room for him to grow. Moving on to the capital of the Familia Kingdom, a massive army is standing ready in the castle courtyard. Someone looks out at the huge crowd and mentions how magnificent the whole setup looks. Another guy agrees, but points out that bringing this many troops just to rule a tiny territory seems like overkill. General Achilles stands there with a stern look as the conversation continues. The Prime Minister just gives a smug smile, acting like the general's concern is just a clever joke. He clarifies that most of those people are just porters meant to haul back money and prisoners from the land they're about to take. The soldiers stand ready, hearing that even if an army of thousands is sent to take over a territory, the Prime Minister just smiles and says he's basically enough to handle all the fighting on his own. General Achilles looks on with a scarred face, wondering if that's actually just a bluff, since he's the guy known as the war god and the one who runs the whole kingdom's military. He's got a crazy track record too, like how he just recently wiped out a whole territory's defense by himself. But despite how strong he is, there are a lot of bad rumors going around about him. So the Prime Minister finishes giving Lord Julius's orders, telling them to go ahead and deal with Flanders land. Achilles laughs it off, telling the Prime Minister he's got a great sense of humor, but he's staying focused, because the Prime Minister is convinced the end result is going to be the same no matter what. He turns away with a smirk, mentioning that the plans are set and the troops are already prepared to move. Achilles gives the Prime Minister a message to pass along, telling that bureaucrat Mayashi to shut his mouth and just hurry up and kill the Lord, claiming that if he does, they'll show everyone how to crush Flanders in just a couple of days. He finishes by calling the guy an old man, but right then something heavy slams into the outer wall, causing a massive crack to spiderweb across the stone, and the whole place lights up from the force of the hit, while the soldiers below can only watch. The Prime Minister is totally thrown off, and Achilles can't believe his eyes when he realizes the outer wall is actually breaking. The stone gives way with a loud crash, leaving a giant hole right in the middle of their defenses as the Prime Minister stares into the smoke, trying to see who's there and asking who it is. A girl steps out from the dust and rubble, looking completely calm as she says her name is Luna. She keeps walking through the wreckage, introducing herself specifically as Luna from Flanders domain, before finishing by telling them she's come there to see the great sage Julia. Achilles just stands there looking completely drained while the Prime Minister looks around, asking where the girl went, but outside the guards are already stopping her, asking if she even has a referral letter. Luna looks a bit confused, so the soldiers explain that she can't just walk in to see the great sage without a formal appointment or a letter of recommendation, which makes Luna realize she got it all wrong since she actually thought they were interested in her. The soldiers just tell her that's how it works, and she gets pretty annoyed, muttering about how these kinds of fans are such a hassle to deal with. She decides it's time for a change of plans and steps forward through the rubble, leaving the soldiers panicking and demanding to know who she is. She doesn't back down, telling them again that she has business with the great sage Julius. She tells them to move aside if they don't want to get hurt and starts casting some advanced wind magic, unleashing a massive high storm spell that tears through the area, blowing the soldiers away as they can't even finish their own sentence. The guards get hit by the blast and one of them yells out in frustration as they're forced back, and another looks around totally confused, wondering where the attack even went since it just vanished. Inside, Edward is just chilling in a chair and laughs, calling Luna a pretty lively intruder. He figures he might as well check things out for himself, and Luna watches in surprise as her magic gets completely cut down right in front of her. Edward tells her to pipe down, warning her that just watching might get her hit by a stray shot, and then he shows up through the mess with a huge, creepy grin on his face. Luna just stares at him, completely shocked by what's happening, mostly because the guy just cancelled out a massive magic attack using nothing but his bare hands. Edward tells the guards to get out of his way, and they don't waste any time backing off, leaving Luna standing there, breaking a sweat as she realizes she's in a real fight now. The vibe in the room shifts instantly because the level of power coming from this new guy is just totally different, and Luna can feel it immediately, frozen in place by the insane presence he's giving off. General Achilles keeps walking forward with a completely calm look on his face, leaving Luna shaking so hard she can barely stand, realizing this guy's power is as big as Sage Julius, or maybe even bigger. Achilles finally stops and takes a look at them, sounding pretty disappointed as he asks why it's just a girl and a little kid. He doesn't even think they're worth his time, so he tells them he'll let them go as long as they scram right now, which leaves Luna staring in shock, recognizing him as General Achilles while he complains about losing his chance to blow off some steam. She stands there completely stunned, caught between the fear and wondering if she's actually relieved he's not attacking. One of the guards tries to speak up, reminding the general that even if it's a kid, they're the ones who smashed the castle walls, but Achilles just tells the guards to handle it themselves, since he's got zero interest in picking on women and children. General Achilles looks pretty annoyed as he explains he's in a terrible mood for personal reasons, warning them that if he actually goes all out, he'll end up wrecking everything nearby. But Alma doesn't care, he's already made up his mind no matter how strong this guy is, and Luna backs him up, saying she has to see the great sage Julius because she needs to save her father. So she steps forward and demands that he lets them through, immediately launching a fireball that creates a massive explosion right in front of the general. Achilles just sighs, complaining about how everyone keeps going on and on about Julius, and as the smoke clears, he casually points out that keeping your distance while casting is the smart play, looking completely fine as he admits she hasn't even touched him yet. But he's impressed she knows how to fight someone with unknown powers. Luna isn't backing down at all, immediately following up her last attack with some advanced wind magic, which actually gets a reaction out of Achilles, who thinks it's interesting that a rookie is treating him like a real enemy. Achilles gets a serious look on his face and says if that's how they want to play it, then so be it, instantly moving so fast he's just a blur, while debris starts flying everywhere from the sheer force, triggering a massive shockwave that forces Luna to huddle down just to keep from getting blown away. Achilles doesn't seem stressed at all, casually mentioning that seeing someone use teleportation is actually pretty rare, while Luna is completely losing it, thinking it's impossible for him to cause this much damage just by throwing a single stone, since he managed to rip right through her advanced magic and still had enough power left to smash the stone wall behind her. Before she can even process that, a whole barrage of stones comes flying at her like cannonballs, tearing up the ground and forcing her to scramble out of the way as they whistle past her head. She looks over at him and realizes this guy is on a completely different level than anyone she's ever fought, especially since she notices he's reading her eyes to predict her next move, and his accuracy is only getting better with every shot. Luna isn't holding back and pulls out her water magic, creating a massive aqua shield to completely surround her as she drops a giant aqua fall right on top of Achilles. But Luna is confident because she knows nobody can actually punch through water, so she plans to just wash him away, except she's totally wrong. She loses it when she sees the entire pillar of water getting shoved aside like it's nothing. Achilles is just grinning like a maniac while he charges through her magic with enough force to blow her mind. She realizes he didn't even touch the water. He used sheer wind pressure to push the whole spell back, and the water slams into the castle wall with a huge crash, leaving the area completely wrecked, while Achilles just stands there looking pretty pleased with how things are going. So he starts looking around and asks if she really thinks she can just hide inside the castle walls like that, mentioning that her teleporting away is actually pretty impressive for a girl her age, but he's not letting up. Achilles stands over Luna and tells her to look behind her because the exit is right there, so she should just hurry up and leave, but Eric is staring at the castle walls in shock, seeing how much damage has already been done to the structure, and Achilles starts wondering if this is some kind of physical enhancement gift. But he realizes a normal gift wouldn't give someone this much crazy strength, thinking they might be using magic to boost their speed and the rocks they're throwing. He figures they probably aren't any good with direct attack magic since they haven't used it once. Yet Luna speaks up and tells him she didn't actually run away, which makes Achilles turn around and ask what she's talking about as she gives him a nervous little smile and says she actually wanted to come to this specific spot. The ground suddenly gives way under Achilles, catching him completely off guard as he starts to drop. He can't even process what's happening and just lets out a confused sound while his eyes go wide, and one of the soldiers screams out for Lord Achilles while Eric watches the whole thing go down with a worried look. And just like that, a massive piece of the stone wall slams down and kicks up a huge cloud of dust. Achilles reveals that he actually swapped the space they were standing in with the castle gate, explaining that this massive steel door is basically indestructible unless someone hits it with high-level attack magic. He looks at her with a smug grin and asks if her power lets her move other objects besides herself, and Luna just stands there looking completely overwhelmed while the dust from the collapse starts to clear, leaning in right next to her face. Achilles demands to know one more time where Julius is hiding. He stays focused on her, repeating the question about Julius's location while she looks away, noting how impressive it is for someone as young as her to be using such advanced magic. He goes on to say she must have been lucky enough to get a really powerful gift, but his expression turns dark as he tells her she's exactly the kind of person he can't stand. Luna looks him right in the eye, finally finding her voice to ask why he's so obsessed with finding Julius. Luna looks him in the eye and says she wants to make a deal, offering to follow him if he agrees to have her father released, and Achilles is caught off guard, asking if she really means her father, the Lord of the Flander territory, Eric. He gets this intense look in his eye as he repeats the name Flander to himself, suddenly realizing that's the reason the troop dispatch was put on hold, and he starts grumbling about some vile scum trying to expand their own power. Luna just stands there looking confused, but then it hits her that if that's the case, then things are actually way worse than they look. Achilles looks like he's hitting a breaking point, muttering that what's happening is impossible since there isn't even a trace of magic being used. He starts to lose it, looking completely unhinged as he tells himself that if he just gets rid of this mysterious intruder right now, then everything will finally go back to the way it's supposed to be. Meanwhile, Luna watches in total shock, unable to believe that anyone could actually smash through a solid steel door using nothing but their own bare hands. Achilles is looking pretty stressed out. The guy known as the War God is clearly feeling the pressure, and it turns out his hidden power is the Berserker gift. He starts clutching at his own body as the truth about his power comes out. He can't actually shoot magic like everyone else, so instead he turns all that internal magic into pure physical energy. Growing up, everyone treated him like a total loser since he couldn't use spells, but he ended up becoming a legend anyway through sheer fighting skill, earning that War God title through nothing but brute force. Back in the moment, he looks around worried and wonders if he's already too late to stop what's happening. Luna realizes things are going south fast. She tells herself she needs to get away and put some distance between them immediately. She leaps back as the floor shatters into pieces from the impact. Achilles isn't impressed at all, just grumbling that using teleportation again is pretty unoriginal, and Luna just stands there, totally shocked by how fast he's moving. The knights watching the fight are completely losing it. One says he just vanished, while another is shocked that Lord Achilles can even teleport, but the reality is way more insane. He isn't using magic at all, he's just jumping at such high speeds that the human eye can't even keep up, and he comes crashing down with a massive punch aimed right at Luna. She's stuck on the ground looking up as the air around him literally explodes from the force of his movement. Luna starts panicking because she knows she's in trouble. She thinks about dodging or teleporting away, but she realizes she's just not fast enough to make it in time. Just as the hit is about to land, something blocks the attack and sends a shockwave through the air, shattering the ground and stopping Achilles dead in his tracks. He's completely caught off guard, his eyes go wide as he tries to process what just happened. A mysterious figure in a black cape stands tall in the middle of the chaos. Achilles gets sent flying back through the debris, while the knights just watch in awe at the person who just saved her. Luna looks up from the floor, slowly starting to realize exactly who just stepped in to help. Achilles looks pretty worried now that he's seen his opponent, and Julius just stands there with his mask on, looking totally calm despite the fight. Achilles finally calls it out. The guy who just showed up is none other than the great sage Julius himself. Julius stands with his back to the chaos, mentioning he just got a report from Edward's messenger. Turns out his guest has been causing quite a bit of trouble, and Achilles can't believe he's calling her a guest, immediately pointing out how much of the wall that intruder just wrecked. But Julius isn't buying it, telling Achilles that most of this damage actually looks like it came from him losing control and rampaging around. Looking at the massive hole in the stone, Julius says he'll just pay for all the repairs and damages out of his own pocket. He tells the shocked knights he'll take care of the paperwork too. He's just going to label the whole fight as an accident during training, and he even offers medical help, saying any soldiers who got hurt or are feeling shaken up should come forward for treatment later. He looks over at the general and asks if there's anything else they need to settle before they wrap this up. Achilles just gives a little smirk and says no, that's everything, and just like that, the soldiers start packing it in. The whole army marches away in perfect rows, leaving the courtyard empty as Luna looks up at her savior, and Julius quietly says her name. Julius suggests they take things somewhere more private and move the talk to his room, and once they're settled, he asks if her big goal is to get Eric freed and put back in charge of the Flanders territory. Luna doesn't hesitate, she tells him that's exactly what she wants, though Julius just sits back and thinks about it for a second, leaving Luna standing there feeling the pressure. She looks at the man across from her, remembering he's the great sage Julius, and she starts worrying about what it would be like to serve him. He's the kingdom's strongest magician and known for being a totally ruthless prime minister, so she can't help but wonder what kind of crazy stuff a guy like that would make her do. Despite the fear, she grips her dress tight and tells herself she's going to save her father, and she's prepared to do whatever it takes, even if she has to get her hands dirty to make it happen. The silence is broken when Julius suddenly asks if she really thinks he's some kind of demon. Luna nearly jumps out of her skin, realizing she said those thoughts out loud, but Julius just tells her to stop making such a scary face. After all, this deal is good for her too. Julius looks right at Luna and reminds her of what he said before. He isn't actually interested in her as a person, but it's her hidden talents that he's really after. He stares her down from behind his mask. making Luna look up at him in total confusion as she asks why he would even want something like that. So Julius leans in and starts to explain exactly what his goal is. He tells her that Luna's eyes go wide and she completely freezes up, barely able to make a sound after hearing his demand. Nearby, a man starts sweating and loses his cool, asking if he really just heard her say that. He quickly announces that the troop move to Flanders is being called off. They're going to let Lord Eric go and just send some advisors to keep an eye on things instead. Julius stands there with Luna in the middle of the huge hall and clarifies that while that's part of it, it's not exactly what he was getting at. He looks thoughtful for a second and brings up the kid, confirming that yeah, things are moving along. The scene ends with him saying her full name out loud, rough, Luna of the Flanders territory, as he stands there like a shadow. Julius drops a massive bombshell on everyone, announcing that he plans to take Luna as his wife, which leaves Edward sweating and looking completely stressed out as he asks if Julius is actually being serious. Luna just stands there in total silence, her eyes wide as she tries to make sense of what just happened. She can barely get the words out, stammering about a wedding while staring at the desk in front of her. Moving on, Luna snaps and tells him to shut up. Thinking about what a pervert he is and remembering Sanya's warning, she yells that she's an adult and brings up her height to prove it. But Julius doesn't budge, repeating that he's only interested in her power and wants it under his control. Luna looks down, asking if that power is really worth threatening her father and her entire home for, and she stares him down, wondering why he's so desperate to get his hands on that kind of strength. Julius simply tells her the ceremony is tomorrow, leaving Luna sitting alone in her room to think. Julius looks out the window at the dark sky and tells Luna it's getting late, so he's sending someone to show her to her room for the night. As they walk through the halls, Luna realizes that Julius is definitely just using the marriage as a way to get control over her magic power. Luna keeps her head down, looking completely miserable. As they walk, Edward can clearly tell she's taking the news pretty hard. So he looks over at her and tells her to stop making such a gloomy face, since there might be an upside to all this. Edward explains that while he gets why she's upset about a forced marriage, this is actually a huge opportunity that most nobles would kill for, which leaves Luna confused as he goes on about how she'll have more power than most nobles and full access to all the palace's luxury baths and the massive orchards filled with flowers. But the thing that really catches her attention is him mentioning the royal library full of rare magic books. The thought of all those magic tomes has Luna second-guessing things, and she starts to think that maybe being stuck here won't be so bad after all. Edward adds one more thing, mentioning how crazy it is that Julius is over 60 years old and still manages to look that good. Luna completely loses it, yelling about how there's no way he's that old, but Edward confirms he was already the prime minister back when he was just starting out as an adventurer. Edward looks down with a serious expression, thinking back on things as he asks Julius if something is wrong. Julius stares out the window and says it's nothing, just thinking about why people even want power. Edward admits he doesn't really get Julius's true goals either, but he remembers a time way back when Julius said something while staring at a painting. As Julius holds onto a letter, Edward recalls him saying he had a promise he needed to keep. Suddenly, someone's voice rings through the halls, yelling at someone else not to mess with them. The guy tells Julius that the soldiers have been ready to go for a long time now. He's furious because after all the delays, Julius is calling everything off just to marry some young girl. The guy with the mark on his head gets right in Julius's face, asking if he has any idea how much trouble he's making for everyone else. Julius stays completely calm, telling him he's positive this is the right move for the kingdom's future. The guy just scoffs and says that from where he's standing, it just looks like an old man who's finally losing it. Julius makes it clear that the matter is settled. He tells everyone the ceremony is happening today and there's no changing it. He reaches out and hands over an invitation, saying he really wants them to be there for the big event, while Luna just stands there looking completely stressed out, especially with Achilles collapsed on the floor right behind her. Achilles struggles to get back on his feet, trying to tell Julius that he didn't get a chance to finish what he was saying, but he just starts laughing to himself, muttering about how she's all alone now. It's enough to make Luna totally freeze up. Dark energy starts pouring off Achilles as he hunches over in pain, and it looks like that weird horn of his might be coming back. It turns out his berserker gift is a double-edged sword that forces all his magic power to stay trapped inside his body. Julius looks back with a grim expression, explaining that having that much raw power definitely comes with some nasty downsides. The guy's emotions are totally redlining, which is causing his internal magic to go completely haywire. Unlike everyone else who vents magic naturally, Achilles is basically a ticking bomb because he can't let any of that energy out. It turns out all that magic power piling up inside a person starts messing with their actual nerves, and right now, the war god is officially going berserk. Achilles stands there looking like a monster, muttering about how he can actually hear a voice inside his own head. Luna and Lord Fellows are both watching this go down in total shock. The vibes are just completely off. Achilles finally loses it and screams at the top of his lungs, yelling for everything to just break into pieces. He lunges forward, screaming at Julius to die while calling him a pervert. Julius keeps his cool behind his mask, telling the guy he's got the wrong idea and it's not like that at all. Luna is watching them and realizes this is turning into a nightmare. If Julius actually fights the war god head-on, it's pretty much a guarantee that one of them is going to end up in a really bad way. She reaches out and grabs onto Julius's cloak, calling his name while wondering if she should even try to stop this. Achilles is hitting rock bottom, thinking about how he could have just married into the territory if it wasn't for Flander and Julius. He knows he was saved once. But even with all his power, he feels like things are completely slipping away. Back in the heat of it, Julius holds his hands out and tells everyone not to do a single thing, looking dead serious behind that mask of his. He gets ready to drop a unique skill that no one saw coming. He clasps his hands together to trigger some heavy environmental magic, and the whole atmosphere just shifts. A massive blast or blade cuts right through the air, catching Achilles completely off guard while he looks on in total shock. A loud scream rips through the area, making Luna look around and wonder if that was Achilles or someone else. It all happened so fast that she can barely keep up with the chaos unfolding right in front of her. Luna tries to process what just went down, but then she starts picking up on this pathetic vibe that feels weirdly familiar. She remembers relying on her own magic to get everyone into the palace, but it looks like their luck just ran out. Alma looks back at the chaos and mentions how the vibe is getting pretty unsettling. Luna just watches in total shock, yelling out Alma's name as everything starts falling apart. He keeps his cool though, casually calling out to her to try and keep her focused on staying alive. Over on the other side, Edward is losing it, wondering how an intruder even got past the castle's barriers, or if they used teleportation to just show up out of nowhere. He quickly stops overthinking it, deciding that the how doesn't even matter anymore. Alma locks eyes with his target, making it clear that this guy is his prey and no one else's. He walks over and tells Luna he's relieved she's okay, especially after hearing she was in some serious trouble. But before they can catch a breath, Luna screams his name again. A massive shockwave or attack rips through the air right in front of Alma's face. The force is so heavy it literally shatters the ground under him, forcing him to brace himself against the impact. He stares wide-eyed at the damage, realizing that the power he's dealing with is on a whole different level. Luna just stands there looking completely worried, quietly saying Alma's name as she watches the fight. The kid is finally identified as Alma Fellows, the one rumored to be a boy with serious ties to the Empire. People are starting to realize he's that same mysterious boy who handed over a super rare Flander item to Lord Eric, making him even more of a target as Edward watches the whole thing go down with a smug look on his face. The big guy attacking him is getting frustrated because no matter how many times he punches, Alma doesn't react at all. It's a type of magic he's never run into before. He tries to throw some fake attacks to catch him off guard, but even those don't work, making him wonder if the barrier just blocks every impact automatically. The attacker looks him right in the eye and asks a real question: if the shield is that perfect, how is he even able to stand on the ground? Suddenly, the guy stops hitting the shield and smashes his fist straight into the floor, blowing the whole ground apart and taking Alma by surprise. He realizes his footing is gone as the floor shatters under him, but then the guy drops some logic, telling him that if he's blocking absolutely everything, he shouldn't even be able to breathe in any air. The attacker gets right in Alma's face with a creepy grin, asking if his barrier just works by detecting the kinetic force of objects. Alma looks pretty worried as the guy starts moving his hand toward him super slowly, explaining that's exactly why he's going to reach through the shield like this, acting like he's just gently patting an old man on the back. He's convinced that if he just grabs onto him slowly enough, the barrier won't even realize it needs to stop him. The guy stands over the massive crater he made, looking down at Alma, who's still stuck in the hole, and suddenly he starts losing it, clutching his own arm and yelling about something crazy happening to his body. Alma watches as the dude starts steaming, realizing the shield's auto-counter attack just kicked in and started doing work. But then Alma notices someone else and calls out to General Achilles, which catches the attacker completely off guard. Achilles stands there looking calm behind his mask, simply asking the big guy if he's finally managed to calm down a bit. The attacker just snaps back, asking how he's supposed to be chill when his arm is literally smoking right in front of him. Achilles reminds the guy that he's the one who started the fight, but the attacker just yells back that anyone would fight an intruder. Achilles keeps it cool and says Alma is his guest too, which just makes the big guy even saltier. He tells Achilles to stop acting like he won a game of rock, paper, scissors after the fact and finally decides he's had enough. He starts walking off, shouting that he's done and doesn't even care anymore. One of the knights looks pretty worried, asking Achilles if it's really okay to just let the guy walk away like that. Achilles doesn't seem bothered, just stating that the plan to stop the deployment is official now, while the attacker walks away annoyed. The big guy admits to himself that while he can handle one monster, there's no way he can deal with two of them at once. The knight behind him is totally confused about what two monsters he's talking about, then he looks over at Alma and starts putting it together. There's this heavy presence in the room as someone realizes that Julius actually has two of these insane powerhouses on his side. The attacker clenches his smoking arm, promising himself that he's going to get even for the wounds he took today. But for now, things calm down as Achilles turns to Luna's group and starts by apologizing for all the crazy stuff that just went down. The masked man officially introduces himself to everyone as Julius, but he's not just some noble, he's also known throughout the whole kingdom as the Grand Sage. Alma is caught off guard for a second, but he quickly keeps his cool and says he understands who he's dealing with now, realizing this is the exact same legendary figure he's been hearing about in all those rumors lately. Julius doesn't waste any time, asking straight up what brought them all the way here at a time like this. Alma immediately drops to one knee, apologizing for the surprise visit before explaining he's there to speak for the Flanders territory, making it clear that while they're ready for a fight if it comes down to it, they'd way rather just talk it out. He's actually pretty glad the fellow's family raised him with enough manners to stay polite, even when things are this tense. Julius just stares back, sounding a bit skeptical as he repeats the part about Alma being there to share his side of things. Alma doubles down and tells him the truth, that the whole plot against Lord Eric is nothing but a bunch of fake charges. Alma keeps things professional, explaining that neither Lord Eric nor the people in the village have any bad blood with the kingdom. To prove they're serious about peace, he offers up a rare treasure the village has been protecting, presenting a fancy-looking orb on a stand, though he secretly admits to himself he just grabbed it from his own stash. Julius doesn't even look at it before saying the gift isn't needed, which leaves Alma completely confused. Julius explains that while it's a nice gesture, the whole conflict has already been resolved through a different deal, stopping everyone in their tracks when he announces that Luna is actually going to be marrying him. Alma's jaw pretty much hits the floor as he tries to process the idea of them getting married so suddenly. Edward steps in to explain the logic, saying that by joining the family of the kingdom's top official, the Flanders territory and its lord will finally be safe from any more trouble. He even points out that Lord Eric has already been let out of prison and is currently being put up like a guest, while Eric sits by himself looking totally crushed, just quietly saying Luna's name. Raoul isn't buying any of this and starts yelling, pointing out that they're basically just trading Eric's life for Luna's freedom. He keeps shouting that the marriage shouldn't even be legal, leaving Alma standing there stunned by the sudden outburst. Julius brushes off Raoul's yelling, calmly saying that while people might have opinions like that, they're bound to come up, explaining that political marriages for the sake of interest happen all the time, and insisting this engagement is totally consensual for everyone, even adding that the whole process is being handled strictly by the kingdom's laws. He turns the focus back to her, asking Luna if that isn't the truth. Alma can only watch her, barely whispering her name as he waits for a response, while Luna just stands there with tears welling up in her eyes, looking completely heartbroken. She finally finds her voice and addresses both Alma and Raoul, thanking them for coming all this way just for her sake. Deep down, she tries to convince herself that this is okay, even if she doesn't really understand why she's feeling this way, telling herself that if she goes through with marrying the Grand Sage, her father and everyone back home will finally be safe. Luna thinks about how the kingdom's help will finally let her territory grow, and though she's only known Alma and Raoul for a few months, Alma's face is the only thing she can think about right now. She tries to convince herself that if everyone else is happy, then everything is fine, because seeing them smile is the only happiness she needs. Alma just watches her, looking completely worried as he says her name under his breath. Julius breaks the silence by announcing that the wedding ceremony will take place tomorrow, telling the group they are invited as Luna's friends and that his people will get rooms ready for them. He looks at Luna and tells her she must be exhausted, suggesting she should head off and get some rest before Alma watches her go, the weight of the situation finally sinking in for him. Later on, Luna stands alone in a quiet room staring up at a massive wedding dress, telling herself one last time that everyone else's happiness is all that matters to her. Luna lies there in the dark with a cloth on her head, looking completely drained. She can't stop thinking about everything and wonders why she couldn't just bring herself to say what she needed to.